Long before the first empires rose, before the pyramids pierced the sky or writing etched its mark on stone, there was a world teeming with secrets, a world we barely understand. 30,000 years before the dawn of recorded history, humankind walked a very different Earth, an Earth filled with strange symbols carved into cave walls, colossal structures with no known builders, and tools so advanced they challenge everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. Who lit the first sacred flame inside a cave in Qafzeh? What purpose did the towering megaliths of Göbekli Tepe serve, thousands of years before agriculture? And why do ancient artifacts buried deep in the ice or sand seem to whisper of civilizations long lost to time? These are not stories of myth or fantasy. These are real mysteries, unearthed by archaeologists, debated by scholars, and left unanswered by time. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the shadowy echoes of our forgotten past, because what lies buried beneath the surface might just rewrite everything we know about where we came from. The cavern air is cool and damp, each breath carrying the faint echo of centuries. In the dim light of your headlamp, the walls of Hohenstein-Stadel cave in the Swabian Jura region of southern Germany take on a sacred hush, as though the very stone remembers the hands that once held this place in reverence. Tucked away on a ledge, nearly invisible to all but the most careful eye, lies a fragment of ivory so intricately carved that it seems almost to breathe. This is the Lion Man, or Löwenmensch, one of the world's oldest known sculptures, an enigmatic fusion of human and beast fashioned from the tusk of a woolly mammoth more than 35,000 years ago. Its diminutive size, just under a foot tall, belies its power. The head, shaped with startling realism, tilts slightly forward as if peering into our own world from the mists of the Ice Age. Below that regal muzzle, slender arms and a graceful torso hint at a being born of both flesh and faith. But why was this figure created? What compelled our Paleolithic ancestors, living in a landscape dominated by glaciers and roaming megafauna, to fashion such a creature? Mainstream scholars propose that the Lion Man may have been a robust symbol of shamanic transformation, an intermediary between the human and animal realms, facilitating rites of passage or hunters' blessings. In an era when survival depended on reading the patterns of predator and prey, could such a figure also have served as a talisman, imbuing its owner with the strength and cunning of the great cat? Yet even as the Lion Man's expressive features invite admiration, they also provoke deeper questions. Was this ivory idol simply an artistic flourish, an exploration of form and imagination among Ice Age artisans? Or did it represent something more, perhaps a totemic ancestor, worshipped in secret ceremonies deep within the cave's labyrinthine chambers? Some researchers have noted that the work's craftsmanship evolved over successive recarvings. Layers of older carvings were chipped away, suggesting that the figure was constantly reshaped, reborn, and renewed. In the flickering beam of archaeological lights, the ivory's surface reveals microscopic striations, proof of countless hours spent with stone tools, painstakingly sculpting every sinew and tuft of mane. Yet the figure's final form is neither wholly feline nor fully human. It dwells in a twilight zone, a place of transformation where identities blur. Could this duality reflect ancient rites aimed at passing between worlds? Did the sculptor seek to capture not only the ferocity of the lion, but also the vulnerability of our own species, perched precariously at the top of the food chain? Fringe theories whisper in the shadows. Some propose that the Lion Man was a visitor from a forgotten civilization, an echo of knowledge lost when Ice Age tribes scattered before the advancing cold. Others suggest it was crafted under the guidance of a visionary, an individual tapped into experiences we cannot fully grasp, capable of seeing the world in ways that transcend mere survival. Of course, these ideas cannot be proven. They hover at the margins of what evidence can support, yet they persist, inviting us to consider realms beyond rational reconstruction. Archaeologists have attempted to piece together the Lion Man's story through carbon dating and comparative studies of other Swabian Jura artifacts. Similar carvings, bears, horses, mammoths, populate nearby caves, but none reach the same level of hybrid grandeur. The cave itself yielded not a single human burial, no hearths or domestic refuse close to the sculpture's niche. This emptiness only deepens the mystery. The Lion Man was clearly important, yet its context remains elusive. Was it created in secret, hidden away from prying eyes? Or was the cave a sanctuary where art and ritual intertwined, shielded from the harsh realities of Ice Age life? Imagine the sculptor at work, the glint of torchlight reflecting off dripping stalactites as ivory dust settled like ancient snow. Fingers roughened by flint tools, heart racing with each delicate incision. What thoughts flickered across that artisan's mind? A prayer for the next hunt? A plea for protection against the cold? Or simply a desire to manifest a vision, an inner creature born of dreams in a world where the boundary between reality and spirit was thin as the razor's edge? And what became of the Lion Man after its creation? For millennia, it lay abandoned, fractured and forgotten beneath layers of sediment. Centuries of runoff bored channels in the cave floor. The sculpture's fragments tumbled into niches where they waited, silent guardians of a truth we can only glimpse in fragments. It wasn't until the late 1930s that speleologists unearthed its pieces, dull, broken shards that, when pieced together, revealed the astonishing work of an Ice Age artisan. Today, reconstructed and displayed behind glass, the Lion Man stares out at us, a testament to human creativity on the edge of extinction. Yet even as we marvel at its form, its gaze seems to question us in return. What remains undiscovered in the shadowed reaches of our past? What forgotten rituals, lost languages, or vanished beliefs wait patiently for us to uncover their secrets? The ivory figure's silent roar still echoes in the chambers of that German cave, calling us to look deeper, to listen to the voices carved in bone. So let us follow its lead, for in the space between human and beast, past and present, fact and speculation, we might just find new paths into the heart of our own mysterious origins. And just as the echoes of ivory and stone fade from our ears, we turn our gaze to another relic of Ice Age ingenuity, a humble lump of blackened resin that has survived tens of thousands of years in the debris of a Neanderthal hearth. Imagine a windswept ravine in what is now the western foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, where jagged limestone outcrops form natural shelters. In the twilight glow of an ancient fire, flickering embers dance upon rough-hewn stones. There, nestled between fragments of flint and animal bone, lies a small, glossy lump of birch tar, an adhesive so unassuming that its discovery only occurred when meticulous excavation revealed traces of human craftsmanship at sites like Königsauer in Germany and Campitello in Italy. This dark substance, derived from the slow burning of birch bark in oxygen-poor conditions, may well be the oldest glue known to humanity, predating the dawn of our own species' use of complex tools. The process itself is astonishingly sophisticated. Bark heated within a primitive clay or stone container, flames carefully managed to capture the tar that seeps out, drip by drip. For Neanderthals contending with frigid winds and scarce resources, such an innovation would have been invaluable, binding stone points to wooden shafts, repairing broken tools, or perhaps even sealing waterproof containers. Yet questions swirl around this primal adhesive. How did Neanderthals first stumble upon the secret of birch bark's combustion? Was it the accidental charring of a discarded pile of bark, or a deliberate experiment born of keen observation. Mainstream archaeologists argue that the manufacture of birch tar demonstrates cognitive abilities once thought exclusive to Homo sapiens: planning, sustained attention, and the manipulation of material properties. But could there be more? Something deeper to this discovery? A hint of ritual or cultural significance lost to time? Picture the artisan crouched near the fire's edge, cupping a lump of freshly formed tar in charred fingers. Perhaps the scent of smoke and resin rose like a sacramental incense, marking the moment as more than mere tool-making. Did this sticky substance carry with it a symbolic weight, a talisman of survival and transformation? Some scholars have speculated that birch tar's antiseptic properties might even have been used medicinally, applied to wounds or dental afflictions. We cannot know for certain, but the possibility invites us to reconsider the boundaries between practical necessity and cultural expression in Neanderthal life. The chemistry behind birch tar is a testament to Ice Age ingenuity. Laboratory simulations show that temperatures must be carefully regulated between 350 degrees Celsius and 400 degrees Celsius to yield a usable resin, far above the typical glow of a simple campfire. This suggests the deliberate construction of low-oxygen chambers, pits lined with stone, covered with turf or animal hides, with only a narrow vent to regulate airflow. Did Neanderthals intuit these complex thermal dynamics through trial and error? Or did knowledge pass from one generation to the next in oral traditions we can no longer hear? Even as we reconstruct the technical steps, the broader context remains mysterious. At sites like Pozzo and Arenez in France, tiny tar residues cling to the bases of stone tools, preserving a fragile handshake between Neanderthal and Earth. These traces invite us to ponder a cognitive leap: the ability to transform raw material through a multi-stage process, anticipating its future use. In a world where every meal, every shelter, and every tool could mean life or death, birch tar stands as proof that Neanderthals possessed both the imagination and the patience to engineer their world. Yet fringe theories beckon at the edges of the archaeological record. Some propose that birch tar was used in symbolic ceremonies, smeared upon the bodies of the dying to ease their passage, or painted onto cave walls as part of shamanic rituals. Others whisper of an unbroken lineage of resin use, suggesting that our own affinity for adhesives, resins in varnishes, gums in papermaking, may trace back to these early experiments. While such ideas remain speculative, they underscore a compelling truth. Even the simplest material can carry echoes of belief and identity. What remains most striking is how this primitive glue bridges vast chasms of time. The same blackened lump that bound a Neanderthal spear 200,000 years ago resonates with us today each time we peel a bandage or repair a broken object. It reminds us that the impulse to innovate, to bind fragmented pieces into a coherent whole, is as old as humanity itself. And yet, for all we have learned, the full story of birch tar's origin and significance eludes us. We may never uncover the voices of those Ice Age craftsmen, but their sticky legacy continues to challenge our assumptions. Was birch tar merely a survival tool, a means to an end in a harsh environment? Or did it occupy a more profound space in Neanderthal culture, an emblem of transformation, a bridge between the elemental and the conceptual? As we close this chapter on birch tar's ancient mysteries, one question remains: what other secrets lie hidden in the charred hearths of prehistoric camps, waiting for patient hands and curious minds to bring them back to light? And as the embers of birch tar's story fade into the darkness, we now descend deeper into the earth, into the hidden chambers where Neanderthal hands once shaped the subterranean landscape itself. Imagine stepping into Cosquer Cave, deep beneath the limestone plateaus of southwestern France. The air is thick with ancient moisture, and your headlamp's beam dances across walls slick with millennia of mineral deposits. In the gloom, you come upon something astonishing. 2 concentric rings of broken stalagmites, each piece carefully selected and arranged, some standing upright, others laid horizontally like the beams of a primeval cathedral. The rings span nearly 6 meters in diameter, enclosing an open space at the center that seems too deliberate to be random. Mainstream archaeologists date this construction to around 176,500 BC, making it the oldest known Neanderthal-built structure on record. When those stalagmites were broken and moved, they shattered with a sound long swallowed by time. Yet their fragments still emit faint echoes of purpose. A controlled use of fire is evident, with scorch marks suggesting fires lit within or beside the rings, perhaps to illuminate or sanctify the space. Could this have been a gathering place, a communal hearth, a stage for storytelling, or a focal point for ceremony? The meticulousness of the construction invites wonder. Neanderthals hauled stalagmite fragments as long as 2.2 meters from deep within the cave, carrying them through narrow passages by torchlight. Was this effort purely practical? A way to create a barrier against damp ground or prowling predators? Or did the rings hold symbolic meaning, a representation of cosmic cycles, tribal boundaries, or the passage between life and death? The lack of hearth debris or midden refuse inside the rings confounds simple explanations, hinting at a complexity that transcends mere shelter. Some researchers propose that the rings served as a dramatic backdrop for ritual gatherings. Imagine Neanderthal families huddled around a central fire, sharing stories of hunts past, invoking ancestral spirits, or performing rites to mark life's milestones. The cave's acoustics would amplify the crackling flames and low chants, creating an immersive soundscape that linked the builders to forces unseen. In a world governed by the caprices of climate and creatures, might such ceremonies have offered a measure of psychological comfort, a sense of order amid chaos? Yet even as we trace the careful geometry of these subterranean rings, more questions emerge. Why choose this cave, deep beyond the reach of daylight? What compelled Neanderthals to invest days, weeks, or even months into reshaping its dark corridors? The absence of personal artifacts, no ornaments, no pigment residues, suggests that any rituals performed here left no lasting marks on the participants themselves. Was secrecy the point, a sacred vow of silence binding the community to this hidden sanctuary? Fringe theories whisper of Neanderthal shamans, invoking spirit animals by torchlight, using the rings as portals into alternate realms. Some suggest that the circular form mirrors celestial paths, that the builders possessed a distant understanding of lunar or solar cycles. Of course, there is no direct evidence for such sophisticated astronomy, but the mind reels at the possibility that Ice Age humans gazed upward by night and then recreated their celestial visions in subterranean stone. Chemical analyses of the burnt stalagmites reveal pockets of charcoal and bone fragments, indicating deliberate fires rather than accident. These embers may have been stoked to dramatic effect, casting flickering shadows that animated the cave walls. Could the ring's builders have been testing the boundaries between illumination and darkness, inviting members to confront fears, to witness transformation in the play of light and shadow? In a species known for its keen senses and intimate relationship with the natural world, such experiences might have conveyed lessons essential to survival. Today, as modern explorers map the cave's winding passages and 3D scanners capture every protrusion, the Bruneikel rings stand as a testament to Neanderthal ingenuity and imagination. Yet they also serve as a stark reminder of the limits of our knowledge. We can date the broken stalactites and reconstruct the layout, but we cannot hear the voices that once echoed here, nor feel the collective heartbeat of those gatherings. What stories were told, what bonds were forged, and what truths were revealed beneath that flickering firelight. In the silence that follows our exploration, one question remains. What other hidden architectures lie buried in the Earth's depths? Forgotten chambers carved by Neanderthal hands, waiting patiently for us to uncover their secrets? The subterranean rings may be our most remarkable find so far, but they are surely not the last. What mysteries still slumber in the shadows, ready to give us chills with their revelations? And as the charcoal glow of Bruniquel's stone rings fades from our minds, we climb back toward daylight, only to find another portal into prehistory waiting just beyond the horizon. High on a windswept cliff overlooking the Cantabrian Sea, the entrance to El Castillo Cave yawns like a mouth ready to whisper secrets older than civilization itself. Stepping inside, the air grows cool and musty, and the beam of your lamp reveals walls splashed with crimson. At first glance, they seem random, dots of red ochre scattered across limestone like rain on a window pane. But these aren't mere stains of mineral deposit. Some are organized into concentric circles. One panel boasts a solitary disc more than 25 centimeters wide, its pigment still vibrant after more than 40,000 years BC. Here, at one of Europe's most ancient galleries, the world's earliest known art confronts us not through elaborate scenes of animals or human figures, but through the simplest of marks, the red dot. What compelled our Ice Age ancestors to press pigment to stone in this way? Mainstream archaeology suggests that these red discs represent a nascent form of symbolic communication, a primal language etched in color. Carbon dating of overlying calcite layers places some of the dots at upwards of 40,800 years BC, meaning they predate many of the cave paintings in France's Dordogne region and perhaps even the arrival of Homo sapiens in Western Europe. Could these marks be the handiwork of Neanderthals or early modern humans testing the possibilities of art? The debate continues, but the power of the red dot remains undeniable. Imagine the artist, or artists, kneeling before the wall, bound in deerskin and clutching a handful of powdered ochre. How did they prepare the pigment? Did they grind ochre nodules between stones, then mix the dust with animal fat or water to create a paste? Their tools have vanished, yet the paintings endure. Each dot is an echo of that first moment when someone pressed pigment onto rock, transforming a bare cavity into a canvas. Yet even as scholars chart pit after pit and dot after dot, more mysteries emerge. Why so few dots here, and only a handful of faint smudges elsewhere? At some points, the red circles overlap, suggesting that the act of painting was repeated across generations, perhaps as a renewal ceremony or seasonal rite. Were the dots placed to guide travelers through the labyrinthine passages, primitive waypoints in the subterranean dark? Or did they mark territories, clan symbols asserting ownership of this sacred space? Some researchers note that the dots cluster near narrow chambers that funnel sound like natural amphitheaters. Could the painters have used echo and acoustics to enhance ritual chants, their voices reverberating against ochre-splashed walls? Fringe theories, too, stake their claims. A few propose that the red discs are more than mere marks. They are star maps, reflections of the Pleiades or Orion cluster traced onto stone. Supporters point to the spatial arrangement of certain dot groups, but statistical analyses remain inconclusive. Others speculate that the dots served as calendars, marking the passage of seasons or lunar cycles. Yet the absence of consistent spacing and divergence across panels challenges any neat astronomical interpretation. What we can observe, however, is the technical audacity of these early painters. The stalactite-studded ceiling forced them to crouch and stretch, braving drips of melted limestone. The flicker of torches would have cast wavering shadows, making precision all the more difficult. and yet the pigment holds steady, clinging to the stone's pores, preserving a dialogue that began tens of millennia ago. Beyond the red dots themselves, the cave yields tantalizing clues. Nearby chambers reveal what may be footprints, small, childlike impressions pressed into calcite mud before it hardened into rock. Were these young explorers the next generation of artists, learning the ritual of painting from their elders? Or might these prints belong to curious animals, drawn by the scent of ochre and smoke? The footprints and dots together create a layered narrative, one of human presence, of experimentation, and perhaps even of play. The very choice of red ochre is significant. Across continents and cultures, humanity has long associated red with blood, life, and power. Did these early mark makers seize upon ochre's visceral hue to invoke strength for the hunt, or to symbolize birth and rebirth within the darkness of the cave? The pigment's iron-rich chemistry holds an almost magnetic attraction to the eye, an attraction that has echoed down through art history to our own red carpet ceremonies and crimson ribbons. As we withdraw from El Castillo's chamber of dots, the walls behind us seem to pulse with unanswered questions. The scattered discs challenge our assumptions about when and why humans first reached for artistic expression. They remind us that the urge to create, to mark our presence in an indifferent universe, ran through our ancestors' veins as surely as it runs through ours. And so we leave the cave's mouth once more, daylight washing over our backs. But the red dots cling to the mind's eye, markers on the map of human creativity. They whisper of rituals lost to time, of hands reaching into the shadows to leave a lasting trace. What other undeciphered symbols lie hidden in prehistoric caves, waiting for discovery? And what will they reveal about the earliest chapters of our shared human story? And as the faint glow of that single red dot recedes into the cave's shadows, we shift our focus to the object itself, a slender bone needle that has survived tens of thousands of winters in the silent depths of Denisovan Cave. Imagine descending through a narrow fissure in the Altai Mountains, your breath misting in the cool tunnel air. Stalactites drip in rhythmic silence, and the beam of your torch catches on a simple wooden crate sealed within a protective case. Inside lies the bone needle, a delicate shaft, barely 5 centimeters long, carved from the ulna of a bird that once soared above Pleistocene forests. Its surface is smooth to the touch, a testament to repeated handling, and at its tip, the eye is pierced with astonishing precision, so fine that even modern artisans pause to marvel. This tool dates to roughly 50,000 BC, contemporary with the twilight of the Neanderthals and the dawn of Homo sapiens' wanderings into Eurasia. In the mainstream view, the needle's primary function was practical, sewing together the hides and sinews that insulated its maker against Arctic winds. The craftsmanship is undeniable. Under magnification, we see minute striations, evidence of flint microblades tracing each groove. The hollow core is polished to a lustrous sheen, removing all splinters that might snag sinew or shred hide. Yet questions linger beyond utility. Why fashion such a refined implement from scarce bone material when simpler awls might suffice? Was the needle reserved for special garments, ceremonial cloaks, shamanic robes, or the apparel of leaders? Or did its creation mark a broader cultural shift, an embrace of tailored clothing as an extension of identity rather than mere survival? Some archaeologists suggest that its elegance indicates the emergence of symbolic self-expression, that clothing became a canvas for social distinction as much as a barrier against the cold. Picture the Denisovan artisan at work deep within the cave's hush. By torchlight, they split the bird bone lengthwise, then painstakingly carved and sanded each surface. The act required sustained attention and the ability to anticipate the tool's final form, a cognitive leap once thought unique to modern humans. As the eye hole took shape, Chipped flint and tiny bone fragments fell to the floor like pale snow. What thoughts flickered in that maker's mind? A focus on function, certainly, but perhaps also a sense of craft, an aesthetic delight in the slender curve and taper of the shaft. Beyond the needle's form lies a deeper mystery: the absence of similar objects. Despite decades of excavation, this is the only bone needle recovered from Denisovan Cave. Why is it alone? Did it belong to a specialist class of artisans whose tools were jealously guarded? Or was it a lone experiment, an inspired innovation that never became widespread? The cave's other artifacts, a scattering of simple stone tools and fragmented ornaments, offer no direct parallel. This singular find stands like a lighthouse, hinting at an unseen shoreline of vanished practices. Speculative theories whisper of ritual significance. Some propose that the needle was not solely for mending hides, but for crafting sacred garments worn during rites of passage. In many tribal traditions, threads and stitches carry symbolic weight, binding wearer and maker in a shared covenant. Could the needle have been dipped in natural pigments or blessed with animal fats to imbue each stitch with meaning? While no pigment traces remain on its surface, microscopic residues of organic compounds suggest occasional contact with plant resins, perhaps used as a primitive adhesive or as part of a cleansing ritual before use. More radical voices have suggested startling possibilities: that this bone needle was also used for body modification, tattooing or scarification, etching protective marks into flesh. They point to ethnographic parallels where bone awls serve dual roles in garment making and ritual marking. Yet, no associated tools for tattooing have been found in the cave, and the needle's eye seems tailored for thread more than pigment. Still, the line between mundane and sacred in prehistoric life was often blurred, and we cannot dismiss the notion that a single implement might serve multiple purposes in a hunter-gatherer society. What of the needle's final resting place? It was recovered from a layer of fine cave dust, far from living hearths or food debris. This isolation suggests deliberate placement, perhaps ceremonially retired or deposited as part of a mortuary practice. If the needle was deemed vital to a person's identity, it may have been interred as an offering, a trusted companion for the spirit's journey. The lack of bone or ash fragments nearby complicates the picture, but it reinforces the sense that this object held a significance beyond thread and hide. Laboratory analysis has revealed that the bird species used for the bone, likely a grouse or ptarmigan, was not native to the cave's entrance but inhabited alpine meadows miles away. Acquiring such a bone would have required planned hunting excursions or trade networks, pointing to a society capable of resource management and far-reaching connections. The needle thus embodies not only technical skill, but also a broader web of ecological knowledge. When to track summer flocks, how to preserve bones for tool-making, and how to balance functional needs with symbolic aspirations. As modern researchers handle the needle with soft-tipped tweezers, they are awed by its survival. How this slender shaft endured grinding sediment, shifting earth, and millennia of geological change. The needle's simple elegance challenges our assumptions about Denisovan life, revealing a people who valued precision, foresight, and perhaps even artistry. Yet its singularity also reminds us of the fragmentary nature of the archaeological record. For every masterpiece uncovered, countless others remain buried or lost to time. In the hush of the museum's display hall, the bone needle stands under a visor of glass, its shadow cast onto a pale pedestal. Its slender form seems almost to quiver with untold stories, of hands that shaped it, of garments mended beneath flickering torchlight, of ceremonies enacted in the vast darkness of Ice Age caves. And so we depart from Denisovan Cave once more, the needle's slender silhouette etched into our memory. But the question endures: what other delicate tools, rich with hidden meaning, lie waiting beneath layers of sediment? What further revelations about Denisovan ingenuity and culture remain buried in the silent passages of prehistory, ready to give us chills with their discovery? And as we step back into the twilight of ancient passages, leaving behind Denisova's slender needle and its whispered secrets, we set our sights on a far grander tapestry of signs. Cave paintings, etched and painted across continents, bound by patterns that defy simple explanation. Imagine descending into the chamber of the warriors at France's Lascaux Cave, the air cool and still. Your headlamp's halo illuminates sinuous black bison, red stags, and a series of geometric symbols, dots arranged in groups, intersecting lines, and chevrons that seem as deliberate as the animals themselves. Now, journey thousands of miles east to Sulawesi in Indonesia, where hand stencils surround concentric circles and ladder-like motifs dating to at least 40,000 BC. Each site speaks its own language of form, yet across this vast expanse, echoes of similarity persist. Mainstream archaeologists attribute these parallels to convergent creativity. Human minds, wherever they settled, faced similar needs: to mark territory, to record hunts, to invoke the spirit world. Dots might tally successful migrations. Zigzags could map river courses. Handprints affirm the presence of the maker. The repetition of basic shapes, circles, lines, dots, reflects the cognitive universals of pattern recognition, a shared impulse to seek order in the surrounding chaos. But the more we catalog these signs, the more tantalizing their resonances become. In the Gargas cave of the French Pyrenees, negative handprints, pauses of pigment on the rock, cluster near rows of diamond shapes. Across the Atlantic, in Brazil's Serra da Capivara, you find similar hand stencils beside grid formations and brackets of simple lines, all dating to at least 10,000 BC. Might these visual vocabularies represent an unspoken dialogue among Ice Age peoples, an intuitive grammar of symbols transcending oceans? In the subterranean galleries of Chichil Bildagote, Cave Without a Name, in Arizona, researchers have identified clusters of red hand motifs alongside checkered patterns and circular bosses. Though separated by thousands of years and cultural contexts, these shapes mirror configurations found in the Iberian Mediterranean and South Africa's Apollo 11 cave. Such cross-continental echoes provoke deeper questions. Did early humans share symbolic threads that survived migrations, or are we witnessing the natural repetition of human creative instinct? Consider the rhythmic repetition of dot and line motifs at Monte Alegre in Brazil, where horizontal rows of small white dots alternate with red linear dashes. These panels sit near figural scenes, hunting parties, animals poised in motion, but the abstract bands command equal attention. In Europe, at Fond de Gaume in France, polychrome horses stride beneath rows of red dots and triangles. The parallel use of dot sequences, sometimes arranged in vertical columns, sometimes encircling human figures, hints at a symbolic repertoire that may have endured across generations and geographies. Yet explanations remain partial. Some scholars propose that groups on different continents developed shared sign conventions through parallel evolution. Similar cognitive capacities and environmental challenges led to like solutions. Others argue for fleeting instances of contact, hints of transoceanic crossings or coastal voyages carrying ideas on rafts of driftwood rather than in barges of stone. Fringe theories take us further into speculation. A lost global Ice Age culture that spread motifs via migratory networks, leaving behind a cryptic vocabulary carved into rock shelters. Proponents point to the relative simplicity of signs, dots, circles, lines, arguing that such basic geometries could traverse distances even if beliefs and languages did not. They envision early seafaring bands weaving from Africa to Australia, exchanging visual codes at each stopover, While tantalizing, this scenario stretches the limits of current archaeological evidence. In some caves, the placement of symbols deep within narrow galleries suggests ritual significance. At Sulawesi's Liangbulu Sipong 4, hand stencils and concentric circles appear more than 30 meters from the entrance, accessible only to those who carried torches. In France's Chauvet Cave, a panel of geometric motifs sits beside a panel of lions and bears, its abstract shapes occupying equal prominence. The deliberate selection of sites and designs implies that these symbols held meaning beyond mere decoration, perhaps encoding myths, cosmologies, or calendrical information. Modern researchers deploy advanced techniques: portable X-ray fluorescence, 3D scanning, pigment fingerprinting, to map these motifs in unprecedented detail. They find shared pigment recipes, red ochre blended with animal fat in Arnhem Land, similar to mixtures in Spain's El Castillo cave. Chemical parallels invite the question, did prehistoric artists discover identical recipes independently, or did these methods travel along ancient migratory routes? The distribution of symbolic motifs also overlaps with known trade networks. Amber beads from the Baltic reached Aegean shores, while marine shells from the Mediterranean appear in Swiss lakeside settlements. Could ideas have traveled on the same channels that carried exotic materials? If so, cave symbols may represent intellectual cargo as potent as any trade good, visual messages encoded in pigments and tools. As we trace the contours of these markings, from the jagged cliffs of Australia's Kimberley region to the windswept canyons of Utah's Cedar Mesa, their mystery deepens. Why did some communities favor dots and grids, while others preferred meandering lines or nested circles? Are these variations dialects of a larger symbolic language, or entirely independent inventions tuned to local landscapes and cosmologies? The very act of painting in darkness, far from hearths and daily bustle, suggests a separation of sacred and profane. In Grotte du Pec Merle in France, spotted horses emerge alongside handprints, their blotches mimicking the ceiling's natural rock pools. Nearby, rows of dots arcing overhead create a cosmic ceiling, linking animal, human, and star. Could these images map constellations, seasonal cycles, or metaphysical realms? The axes between dots and lines seem to invite mapping of time, of territory, of the unseen forces that shaped prehistoric life. And yet, for all the data we gather, radiocarbon dates, pigment analyses, spatial mapping, these symbols remain eloquently silent. They confront us with the limits of interpretation, reminding us that the minds that painted them are forever beyond direct reach. We glimpse their gestures in ink and ochre, but the words they might have whispered have vanished. As we emerge from the cool hush of the caves into daylight once more, the symbols linger in our imagination, silent witnesses to an era when human thought first reached for abstraction. They challenge us to expand our understanding of prehistoric cognition, to see our distant ancestors not merely as survivors, but as thinkers, artists, and storytellers. What other patterns await discovery in the world's hidden galleries? And what will they reveal about the shared impulses that weave through the human story, across continents and across the millennia? The answers remain buried in the rocky shadows, waiting for patient eyes to uncover their mysteries. And as the echo of cross-continental symbols fades from our minds, we turn our gaze to an artifact of a far deeper antiquity, an engraved freshwater shell unearthed on the banks of the Solo River at Trinil, Java, that whispers of human creativity nearly 500,000 years ago. Picture the Trinil excavation site, its muddy terraces layered with sediments deposited by ancient floods. Heat shimmers off the tropical undergrowth, and the gentle murmur of water masks the silent promise of discovery. Under the careful trowel of an excavator, a simple shell emerges, a curved valve of the bivalve genus Pseudodon. its surface scored with 6 precise zigzag grooves. At first glance, the lines might seem a mere crack or scrape, yet microscopic analysis confirms deliberate engraving. Mainstream archaeologists date this shell to approximately 500,000 years BC, assigning it to Homo erectus, a species once thought devoid of symbolic thought. The zigzags are too uniform, too evenly spaced, to be random damage. Under magnification, each groove reveals the faint parallel striations of a stone tool's edge. Could this be the oldest known abstract design left by our ancestors? If so, it predates European cave art by hundreds of thousands of years, reframing our understanding of the dawn of art itself. What practical purpose might these engravings serve? Some scholars suggest they functioned as a counter, marks to tally days, seasons, or resource counts along the riverbanks. In a world governed by monsoon cycles and migrating herds, the ability to record information could have offered immense survival advantages. Yet the shell's smooth, polished interior suggests it was not repeatedly handled for mundane counting tasks, but set aside as something special, perhaps even sacred. Others propose that the zigzag motif held ritual significance, a talismanic pattern invoking water's serpentine currents or the electric energy of lightning in a tropical storm. In many cultures, the zigzag symbolizes kinetic power or boundary lines between worlds. Were these ancient engravers marking the shell as an object of transformation, an amulet to bridge daily life and the spirit realm? The absence of similar engravings in surrounding finds adds to the shell's aura of mystery, hinting at a practice lost to time. Some researchers argue for a more mundane explanation, that the maker was simply experimenting with the tactile pleasure of incising a smooth surface. The shell's curvature and enamel-like sheen would have provided a satisfying canvas for engraving, and the groove repetition could reflect an early step in technical play, testing stone tool techniques before applying them to stone or bone. Yet even if born of curiosity, the act implies deliberate intention and forethought, cognitive abilities more complex than once assumed for Homo erectus. Fringe theories push the needle further, proposing that these markings represent an embryonic proto-writing system, a visual code whose meaning slipped beneath the threshold of full language. Advocates point to the regularity of the zigzags as evidence of a shared symbolic lexicon, passed among groups through trade or seasonal migration. Yet with only a single engraved shell to reference, such speculation remains tantalizingly out of reach, leaving us to wonder what other marked objects lie buried in Java's sedimentary depths. Chemical analysis of the shell's surface reveals no residues of pigment, suggesting that its maker left the grooves bare, an unembellished signature of intent. Yet the choice of a freshwater bivalve is itself curious. These shells lie in shallow, oxygen-poor waters where the clams bore themselves into muddy banks. Would our ancestor have waded in cooling currents to collect this particular specimen? Or was it already smooth and empty by the river's edge, waiting to be transformed into a canvas for a moment of cognitive breakthrough? Today, the engraved shell rests behind glass in a Jakarta museum, its zigzag pattern preserved in a spotlight's beam. Scholars debate its significance, whether it marks the birth of art, the beginnings of counting, or the first flicker of symbolic culture. But the shell's silent grooves speak most powerfully of what remains unknown. The thoughts behind those cuts, the hands that held the stone edge, the world in which this act of engraving first echoed. What other traces of early human creativity lie hidden in the ancestral waters of Java and beyond? And what will we learn when we finally uncover the next artifact that challenges our deepest assumptions about the origins of art, memory, and meaning? The answers remain submerged in time, awaiting patient discovery in the riverbeds and caves of prehistory. And as the ripples of Java's ancient shell patterns settle into silence, our journey returns to the cool recesses of the Swabian Jura, where one of the oldest and most enigmatic symbols of our species awaits discovery. Imagine stepping into Hohle Fels cave, its chamber opening like a yawning maw carved by millennia of dripping water. The air grows chill as your lantern's glow dances across rough limestone walls, where faint traces of red ochre and charcoal mark the passages once traveled by Ice Age humans. Near a low ledge, nestled among broken fragments of mammoth ivory and flint tools, lies a small, curved figure no taller than your palm. This is the Venus of Hohle Fels, an ivory idol carved with astonishing precision at least 35,000 years BC. At first glance, the sculpture's exaggerated curves seize the eye: broad hips, full breasts, and an incised cave-like head that hints more at symbolism than portraiture. Yet in this elegant abstraction, every detail speaks volumes. The slender arm contours flow into a deeply carved groove, while parallel incisions near the top suggest a headdress, or perhaps the handle of an elaborate garment. Under a microscope, archaeologists have traced the fine striations left by flint tools, proof of hours spent shaping mammoth tusk into this enduring icon. Mainstream interpretation frames the Venus as a fertility symbol, a talisman to invoke bountiful harvests, successful births, or the regenerative power of the earth itself. In an unforgiving Ice Age landscape where food sources fluctuated with the seasons and child mortality ran high, such invocations carried profound weight. Could this figurine have functioned as a ritual object, passed among hunter-gatherer bands to secure communal well-being? Its small size suggests portability, allowing it to travel with nomadic groups as both a symbol of continuity and a reminder of shared identity. Yet even as we consider these practical and spiritual possibilities, deeper mysteries emerge. Why fashion the figure in such a stylized form, omitting faces and limbs, emphasizing certain features while leaving others undefined? Some scholars propose that the abstraction represents a universal ideal, an archetype of femininity distilled into its essential elements. Others have noted parallels between the Venus's curves and the surrounding cave's natural alcoves, suggesting that the sculpture was meant to echo the very walls that sheltered its makers. Was the cave itself part of the artwork, its geology and the figurine woven into a single ritual space? Speculative voices offer more provocative theories. Could the Venus represent not a goddess, but a revered ancestor? An ancestral mother whose spirit guided the group through harsh winters? In this reading, the exaggerated hips and breasts symbolize not just fertility, but the nourishment and protection offered by an elder figure. Alternatively, some fringe interpretations argue that the figurine encodes astronomical information, the angles of its curves corresponding to the tilt of the Earth or the path of the Moon. While no direct evidence supports this alignment, the possibility underscores the sophistication of Ice Age cognition. Recent residue analyses have revealed microscopic traces of red pigment lingering in the Venus's grooves. This discovery suggests that the figure may once have gleamed with ochre, its carved lines painted to highlight key contours. In the flicker of torchlight, a red-tinged Venus would have shimmered against shadowed walls, an uncanny presence in the dim chamber. Was the pigment applied as part of initiation rites, marking the passage of adolescence into adulthood? Or did it denote seasons, each hue corresponding to a time of year, from the icy grip of winter to the thawing warmth of spring? Beyond its form and pigment, the Venus's context deepens the intrigue. It was unearthed in 2008 alongside a fluted point, a spearhead carved from mammoth bone, evidence of advanced hunting technology. These finds suggest that the cave served both practical and ceremonial functions, a workshop for tool making and a sanctuary for spiritual expression. Did the hunters pause between expeditions to retreat into the cave's hushed inner sanctum, shaping ivory with deliberate care and invoking protection for the next journey? Fractures on the Venus's torso hint at a violent past. The sculpture broke centuries ago, its fragments scattered across the floor before being buried under layers of stalagmite-breeding sediment. Its rediscovery required painstaking reconstruction, each shard pieced together like a jigsaw of Ice Age memory. What caused the break? A ritual retirement of an object no longer needed, or an accidental fracture in the bustle of cave life? The patterns of breakage offer silent testimony to events we cannot fully reconstruct. Compare the Hohle Fels Venus to other Paleolithic figurines, stylized women carved from limestone, clay, or bone across Europe's galleries. Each variant reflects local materials and artistic conventions, yet all share an emphasis on the body's central curves. Does this consistency point to a shared symbolic vocabulary among Upper Paleolithic groups, or to independent inventions born of similar human concerns? The Venetian figurines may mirror one another, yet the precise meaning behind their forms remains locked in prehistory. Holding the Venus in hand, replicas today, one senses its dual nature, both intimate and monumental. It fits in a closed fist, yet its presence looms large in the history of art. In its contours lie the echoes of flint strikes, of hands guided by intention, and of thoughts shaped in darkness. It embodies a moment when our ancestors first sculpted not just the world around them, but their own perception of self and society. As we leave Hohle Fels Cave, the Venus's gentle curves etched behind our minds, we carry forward the question that binds all these prehistoric mysteries. What inner worlds did Ice Age artisans inhabit? And what stories did their carvings tell? The ivory figure remains mute in the display case, yet its silent form continues to challenge us, reminding us that in the interplay of stone, ivory, and pigment, the first chapters of human creativity were written with trembling hands and boundless imagination. What other treasures, waiting beneath layers of rock and time, will illuminate the dawn of art and belief in our distant past? The answers lie deep within the Earth's hidden chambers, waiting, like the Venus of Hohle Fels, to give us chills with their revelations. And as we emerge from the hush of ivory curves in Hohle Fels, our journey carries us onward into the realm of abstract signs, those cryptic assemblies of dots, lines, and grids that may hint at the very first stirrings of writing. Picture the entrance to El Castillo Cave in northern Spain, a narrow slit in a sunlit limestone cliff that opens into a winding corridor. With each step, the light dims and the air cools, until at last you stand before a broad wall, its surface adorned not with beasts or hunters, but with repeated geometric motifs. Here, concentric circles sit beside ladders of parallel lines. There, rows of small dots give way to a series of chevrons, their points aligned as if marching into the unknown. The pigment, mixed from iron-rich ochre and animal fat, has settled into the stone's pores, preserving these patterns for upwards of 40,000 years BC. Mainstream archaeology views these shapes as symbolic shorthand, visual cues linked to myth, magic, or memory. Dots could mark the passage of days, while chevrons recall the teeth of fish or flowing water. Ladders might represent pathways between realms, or even the ribs of animals sketched in abstraction. But what if these signs held more than immediate, context-bound meanings? Could they be the earliest whispers of proto-writing, an ancestral precursor to the letters and glyphs we would one day press to papyrus and parchment? To consider writing in the Paleolithic is to tiptoe along the frontier between fact and conjecture. Writing, by definition, encodes language, phonetic or semantic units that map directly onto speech. The geometric cave signs lack any agreed-upon lexicon. They cannot be read in the conventional sense. Yet their recurrence across multiple sites, El Castillo and La Pasiega in Spain, Gargas in France, Sulawesi in Indonesia, suggests a shared visual vocabulary, or at least a parallel impulse to externalize thought in abstract form. Imagine a Paleolithic artisan kneeling before a pale wall, torch in one hand and a lump of red ochre in the other. With deliberate strokes, they trace a series of dots in a grid, perhaps counting the migratory return of birds or recording the phases of the moon. Nearby, a second hand copies a pattern of zigzag lines, echoes of river currents, or the sharp ridges of flint blades. Each sign is inscribed not for pure decoration, but as a lasting record, a memory cast into stone to outlive its maker. In many caves, the placement of geometric panels is striking. Rather than the more accessible chambers filled with vivid animal scenes, these abstract motifs often appear in offshoot galleries, spaces reached only by navigating narrow passages and low ceilings. Their isolation hints at special purpose, a repository for encoded knowledge, or a sacred script accessible only to initiates. Could these remote niches have functioned as Paleolithic archives, where elders recorded important events or passed down secret teachings? Yet the absence of repetition within single sites complicates the idea of a standardized code. In La Pasiega, one gallery bears a unique cluster of rectangles and triangles, while an adjacent alcove displays entirely different marks. The inconsistency frustrates attempts to correlate specific symbols with fixed meanings. And across continents, the same basic shapes reappear, in Africa's Apollo 11 cave, in Australia's Kimberley rock shelters, in South America's Serra da Capivara, but always in local dialects of form and arrangement. The result is a mosaic of motifs that both beckons and eludes. Fringe theories dare to fill these gaps with bold speculation. Some suggest that nomadic bands carried an oral visual system along migration routes, sharing a primitive script that evolved as it passed from group to group. Others argue that the signs encode a cosmological map, a star chart delineating the Milky Way's path across the night sky, or a calendar of solstices and equinoxes. Statistical analyses have attempted to match dot line patterns to lunar cycles or stellar constellations, but the correlations remain tantalizingly inconclusive. What we can say with certainty is that producing these geometric designs required foresight, planning, and a conception of permanence. Unlike the fleeting gesture of a hand stencil, the abstract marks are stable, repeatable, and resistant to casual erasure. Their creators invested time in mapping out spacing and sequence, an intellectual leap toward the idea that symbols can outlive individual lifespans, carrying messages across generations. In the cool shadow of Chichil Bildigoti in Arizona, a panel of red lines and dots lies deep within the canyon's rock alcoves. Portable X-ray fluorescence has revealed that the ochre here shares a chemical signature with deposits more than 50 kilometers upstream, implying deliberate transport of pigment. This fact elevates the signs from spontaneous graffiti to considered acts of communication, a message intended for future travelers or successors who understood its code. Yet for all these clues, the core mystery remains. What did the signs say? Without a Rosetta Stone of prehistory, we can never fully decode their language, if language indeed they ever were. Perhaps they were multi-layered, simultaneously marking time, place, and myth. Or maybe they were creative experiments, tests of patterning and perception that fascinated early artists and thinkers. Either way, they represent an extraordinary cognitive achievement, one that blurs the line between art and writing, between image and idea. As we trace the faint grooves of dots and lines with our fingertips, metaphorically through magnified photographs and 3D scans, we sense the echo of those ancient hands. They reached into darkness not merely to depict the world, but to structure thought itself, to externalize inner abstractions in a medium of stone and pigment. In doing so, they set the stage for millennia of symbolic expression, from Mesopotamian cuneiform to Egyptian hieroglyphs, from Chinese characters to the alphabets we use today. But the origins of writing are not a single event. They are a vast horizon of experiments that may well have begun in the flickering torchlight of Paleolithic caves. Each geometric panel invites us to ponder the moment when humans first asked themselves, can thought be made permanent? The answer, etched in ochre and echoing through time, still waits to be fully understood. What other signs lie hidden in the world's prehistoric galleries, marks that could reshape our understanding of the birth of symbol and script? The cave walls hold their secrets tightly, but the pursuit of those secrets continues, lighting our path into the remotest chapters of human imagination. And as the last echoes of Paleolithic proto-writing drift from our minds, we journey southward, across continents and millennia, to the sunlit entrances of Blombos Cave on South Africa's southern coast. Here, high above the crashing waves of the Indian Ocean, Homo sapiens of the Middle Stone Age left behind more than stone tools and shell beads. They engraved geometric patterns on fragments of ochre that still captivate us today. Step into the cave's mouth at dawn, and you feel a gentle warmth on your face, mixed with the lingering spray of salt air. The interior walls glow amber in torchlight, their surfaces streaked with calcite deposits and occasional red ochre smears. Underfoot, fine sand cushions your steps, punctuated by scattered fragments of marine shells and tiny bone points. Tucked into a shallow depression in the shelter's rear chamber, you discover a small flake of ochre, no larger than a human thumbnail, but its face bears a series of parallel grooves, crisply scored into the surface by a sharp-edged stone tool. This is one of the Blombos Cave engravings, dated by luminescence to roughly 75,000 BC. An age that predates the earliest known cave art in Europe by tens of thousands of years. Mainstream archaeologists hail these cross-hatched patterns, lines arranged in grid-like arrays or repeated chevrons, as evidence of sophisticated symbolic thought. The precision of the incisions implies not random doodling but deliberate abstraction, an intentional marking of ochre pieces selected perhaps for their rich red hue or smooth texture. Yet why carve such patterns into ochre? Some propose that the engravings functioned as mnemonic devices, memory aids for seasonal rounds, resource locations, or the rhythms of shellfish tides. In a coastal environment where shell middens rose and fell with the lunar calendar, the ability to record temporal cycles could have offered a crucial survival advantage. Others suggest that these geometric motifs served as personal or group identifiers, proto-heraldry marking ownership of tools, territories, or ritual objects. The recurrence of similar designs across multiple ochre fragments hints at a shared visual vocabulary within the Blombos community. But the mystery deepens when we consider the ritual possibilities. Ochre itself carries powerful connotations across cultures: blood's color, life's pigment, a bridge between the mundane and the sacred. Could the engraved fragments have been used in ceremonies, their incisions accentuated by powdering the grooves with fresh pigment? In the flicker of evening fires, the sun-red lines would have appeared to glow against the stone's pale matrix, an invocation of ancestral spirits or a prophecy of renewal. Yet no direct evidence of associated ritual deposits, burnt bone, carved figurines, or pigment rubbings has been found in proximity to the engravings, leaving this interpretation tantalizing but unconfirmed. Fringe theories push further into speculation, proposing that the Blombos engravings represent the earliest known writing system, a set of marks encoding phonetic or semantic information passed from hand to hand over generations. Proponents highlight the regular spacing of the grooves and the recurrence of specific patterns, two sets of parallel lines crossed by a third, as possible words or phrases in a proto-script. Skeptics counter that without a cipher key or broader corpus of coordinated symbols, any attempt to read meaning into the lines remains conjecture. Yet the very idea underscores the engraving's profound strangeness. Here, in a coastal rock shelter, our ancestors may have toyed with the concept of recording abstract ideas in a durable medium. Microscopic analysis reveals further enigma. The grooves bear microstriations consistent with a bifacial flint tool held at a consistent angle, suggesting a practiced hand rather than an accidental scrape. Residue studies show traces of an organic binder, possibly plant gum or animal fat, applied to the ochre before or after engraving, perhaps to seal the surface, enhance color contrast, or preserve the pattern. Why combine binder and pigment in this way? Was the fragment part of a composite object, a tool handle, a personal ornament, or a small plaque affixed to a hide curtain? The absence of wear marks or perforations argues against its use as a pendant, yet its refined finish implies it was more than mere debris. The broader context of Blombos Cave enriches the intrigue. Alongside the engraved ochre, excavators uncovered perforated nacreous shell beads, evidence of early personal ornamentation, and finely worked bone awls. These finds point to a community engaged in complex social behaviors, long-distance exchange of raw materials, and aesthetic expression. The geometric engravings fit seamlessly into this portrait of innovation, but they also raise deeper questions. Did symbolic art arise as a byproduct of social networks, or did it drive the formation of those very ties? Did the act of engraving unite individuals in shared ritual, or did it delineate social boundaries and hierarchies? As we step back into the morning light, the ocean's roar returning to our ears, the small ochre flake seems to pulse with hidden stories. Its grooves echo with the rhythm of ancient hands at work, crafting patterns that may have carried meaning we can only glimpse in fragments. We sense the leap of imagination required to abstract the world into lines and shapes, to etch thought into stone. What other silent messages lie buried in the ochre-strewn sands of Blombos Cave, and beyond its walls, in the shadowy enclaves of other early shelters? How many geometric truths, waiting in fractured fragments, remain undiscovered by the patient trowel and the curious eye? The answers lie hidden in the whispering echoes of deep time, inviting us to uncover the next chapter of humanity's first experiments with art, memory, and symbol. And as the ochre-streaked whispers of Blombos Cave recede into memory, our journey carries us northward, across the vast steppes and river valleys, to a landscape forever shaped by the shadow of a vanished giant. Here, in the windswept plains of what is now Ukraine, lie the enigmatic remains of prehistoric villages built not from wood or stone, but from the colossal bones of woolly mammoths. Imagine standing at the rim of a Pleistocene terrace above the Dnieper River, where winds tug at your cloak and the horizon stretches wide and empty. Before you lies the scattered skeletons of these Ice Age leviathans, tusks curving skyward like the horns of fallen titans. Yet closer inspection reveals a startling order. Rib bones leaned in arc after arc, jawbones forming doorways, and vertebrae stacked to create walls. At Mezhirish, 4 separate huts emerge from the earth, each roughly 6 meters in diameter, their frames woven together like the ribs of some sleeping dragon. Mainstream archaeology interprets these bone dwellings as pragmatic shelters, ingeniously assembled by hunter-gatherer bands around 15,000 to 10,000 BC. Wood was scarce on the open tundra, yet colossal bones provided sturdy supports for animal hide roofs. Hearths at the center of each hut bear charcoal and flint fragments, evidence of fires that kept the cold at bay and families gathered for warmth and companionship. The precision of bone placement suggests careful planning. Ribs tipped into the ground at consistent intervals, tusks inserted at regular angles to frame entrances facing the rising sun. Such geometric regularity implies more than chance. It speaks to cognitive abilities of spatial reasoning once thought exclusive to settled societies. Yet as we trace the contours of these great ribs with our eyes, questions echo through the empty air. Why devote so many resources to a single hut, breaking, transporting, and arranging bones from multiple mammoths? Each massive rib weighs up to 20 kilograms. Each tusk must have been wrested free with tremendous effort. Was practicality the only motive, or did these bone houses serve additional purposes? Ritual spaces where the bones of revered animals were woven into the fabric of daily life. Some researchers suggest that erecting the skeletons of hunted giants formed a profound act of respect, a way to honor the beast's spirit and ensure its power lived on within the community. Imagine the builders at work. Long after the sun has dipped below the western hills, torchlight flickers against ivory surfaces. Figures crouch beside heaps of rib bones, aligning each support with careful measurements, perhaps guided by strands of animal sinew stretched taut like a primitive plumb line. Sparks flare as flint scrapes bone, trimming rough edges and securing each beam. Could these nocturnal gatherings, citizens collaborating in hushed murmurs, have carried a ceremonial weight, a communal rite to bind people and pray in a shared story of survival? Beyond Mezhirich, other sites in Ukraine and southwestern Russia reveal similar bone circles. At Dobranichev, the arrangement is more elaborate. Paired tusks create stylized doorways, and multiple hearths form concentric patterns. Nearby stone tools show little wear, as if toolmaking occurred elsewhere and only finished artifacts were brought here. Why? Some archaeologists argue that these sites were seasonally occupied, serving as ritual hubs where disparate bands met to exchange goods, share news, and perform ceremonies. The bone huts become more than homes. They become stages for social drama, venues for weddings, initiations, or funeral rites beneath the open sky. Yet the mystery deepens when we consider possible alignments. Satellite surveys reveal that entrances of several bone dwellings face a common direction toward the winter solstice sunrise. Could the builders have oriented their homes according to celestial events, marking the passage of seasons critical for migratory herds and plant cycles? The idea suggests a cosmological dimension. These bone structures would have functioned as solar calendars, revealing on the coldest mornings the precise day when daylight shifts and the slow thaw of spring begins. Such sophistication hints at an astronomy woven into everyday life, long before formal observatories or star charts. Fringe theories press further into the unknown. Some propose that the bone villages served as centers of prehistoric pilgrimage, drawing travelers from distant regions to witness the bone cathedrals of mammoth worship. Others argue that tunnels and low walls built between huts formed labyrinthine corridors, spaces designed to induce altered states of consciousness, shrouded in torchlit mystery during ritual nights. Echo experiments in replicated bone structures show surprising acoustic properties. A shout or chant at one end reverberates overtone rich at the other, as if the bones themselves carry the voices of the past. Could sound have played a role in ceremonies, drumming against tusks or singing into rib arches to commune with ancestral spirits? The sheer scale of these constructions challenges our notions of prehistoric life. We tend to picture small bands eking out existence, but the mammoth bone villages suggest coordinated efforts across dozens of individuals, perhaps even hundreds. Transporting and erecting bones required leadership, cooperation, and shared vision. This level of social complexity predates the advent of agriculture by millennia, raising profound questions about the origins of community organization and the role of monumental architecture in hunter-gatherer societies. Yet despite decades of excavation, most bone huts lie only partially exposed, their lower segments lost to centuries of plowing and erosion. What additional structures remain buried beneath the rich Ukrainian soil? Might we yet uncover tools, personal ornaments, or symbolic carvings within the bone walls? Clues that could finally illuminate the rituals and beliefs of these Ice Age architects? Each rib fragment still in situ, every tusk half buried, whispers of a story only partly told. As we step back from the skeletal circles and feel the wind shift across the plain, one question lingers in the cold air. What other hidden marvels await beneath the earth, where the bones of ancient giants lie intertwined with the ambitions and rituals of our distant ancestors? The answer lies waiting, silent and patient, beneath the frost-chilled ground of prehistoric Ukraine, ready to give us chills with its revelations. And as the silent skeletons of Ukraine's mammoth villages recede into memory, we turn our footsteps back into the cool hush of upper Paleolithic caves, this time to objects whose voices once echoed through flickering torchlight, the bone flutes of Europe's earliest musicians. Imagine descending into the depths of Geisenklosterle Cave in the Swabian Jura, southern Germany, where the air retains a faint musk of ancient hearth smoke. Your headlamp's beam sweeps across walls stained with ochre, comes to rest on a low rock shelf strewn with ivory beads and chipped stone tools, and there, tenderly placed among limestone nodules, lies a slender tube carved from bird bone. 4 finger holes puncture its smooth surface. At one end, a precisely cut mouthpiece invites breath. This flute, fashioned from the wing bone of a griffin vulture, dates to at least 40,000 BC, making it one of the oldest known musical instruments in existence. Nearby, at Hohle Fels cave, a second flute appears, shaped from the hollow wing bone of a mute swan, its 5 finger holes meticulously spaced to produce a scale surprisingly akin to our modern diatonic system. Under magnification, analysts observe minute striations where stone burns smoothed the bone's interior, a sign of careful craftsmanship aimed at optimizing resonance. Mainstream archaeologists propose that these flutes had practical and social functions. Music could have unified hunter-gatherer bands across the vast Pleistocene landscape, setting rhythms for group hunts or celebrating successful drives of reindeer and horses. The tonal range of the flutes, capable of at least 8 distinct notes, suggests repertoire beyond simple calls, perhaps even rudimentary melodies passed down through generations. Could these instruments have marked rites of passage, their notes guiding newly initiated youths into adulthood beneath the flicker of firelight? Yet even as we marvel at their technical sophistication, deeper mysteries emerge. Why choose rare bird bones, bones prized by vulture and swan, creatures of sky and water, over the more plentiful mammoth ivory found in the same strata? Some researchers suggest symbolic motives. The vulture's scavenging nature, linked to themes of death and renewal, the swan's elegance evoking transformation and migration. Did the makers believe that the bone's origin imbued the flute with affinities for particular sounds or effects, perhaps harnessing the spirit of the bird to carry music beyond the human realm? Picture the flute maker at work, crouched on a ledge, torch smoke curling around a cloak of animal hide. With a sliver of flint, they drill each hole with deliberation, testing the tone by holding the half-finished tube to their lips and adjusting the aperture until the pitch rings clear. The process demands both acoustic intuition and an understanding of material properties, a cognitive leap that challenges assumptions about prehistoric intellect. What thoughts guided each incision? A vision of a mournful serenade beneath the cavern roof? A desire to imitate the bird's own cry? Or a ritual invocation, calling on unseen forces to bless the hunt or soothe the soul? Beyond the caves of Germany, bone flutes have surfaced at other Upper Paleolithic sites. The Dolní Věstonice camp in the Czech Republic, the Prehistoric shelter in France, and even the Sunghir burials east of Moscow, where child graves held ivory flutes as funerary offerings. In each instance, the flutes sit in contexts rich with symbolism, alongside ochre-stained ornaments, exquisitely carved figurines, and human burials dressed in beads. The association suggests that music occupied a liminal space between the living and the dead, art and ritual, community and individual. Speculative theories venture further into the unknown. Some scholars propose that these flutes communicated across distances. Long, sustained notes could travel along river valleys or through forest canopies, signaling migratory paths of herds or coordinating gatherings of dispersed bands. Others argue that the choice of pentatonic scales, common to bone flutes, reflects an innate human preference for certain auditory intervals, hinting at a primordial psychology of sound. Could the flute's melodies have mirrored natural patterns? The rise and fall of water, the rustle of wind and grass, or the calls of fellow creatures, blurring the boundaries between human artistry and environmental symphony? Fringe voices, too, weave intriguing possibilities. Some suggest that bone flutes were tools for altered states of consciousness, repetitive melodies inducing trance, enabling shamans to journey between worlds or commune with animal spirits. Ethnographic parallels in Siberian and North American traditions foreground the flute as a vehicle for healing, its music believed to realign the body's energies. While no direct evidence ties Paleolithic flutes to such ceremonies, the intimate scale of the instruments, the way they nestle against the lips and cradle the breath, evokes a private, almost mystical encounter between player and flute. Laboratory reconstructions have brought these flutes back to life. Modern musicians don replicas and attempt to coax melodies from ancient designs, their notes ringing across museum halls with an otherworldly clarity. The sound is haunting, pure and breathy, yet possessing an ethereal resonance that seems to echo not only within the cavern walls, but across the chasm of millennia. Listening to these tones, one can almost imagine the flickering shadows of Paleolithic dancers, the hush of watchers pressed against rock, and the profound impact of music in a world dominated by survival. Yet for all the data we gather, radiocarbon dates, micro-CT scans, acoustic analyses, the true meaning of these bone flutes remains elusive. We cannot know the melodies they once carried, nor the emotions they stirred. We can only sense their purpose in a society where art and necessity intertwined, where the creation of sound was as vital as the crafting of tools. As we step back into the twilight of otherwise silent caves, the flute's soft echoes linger in our ears, reminding us that the impulse to make music is as old as humanity itself. What other voices, recorded not on parchment but on bone, lie hidden beneath layers of sediment and time? And what songs, yet unsung, await discovery in the hushed darkness of our prehistoric past? And as the soft strains of bone flutes fade from our ears, we shift our focus once more to the shores of South Africa's southern coast, where the rhythmic pulse of the Indian Ocean meets the mouth of Blombos Cave, and where, some 75,000 years BC, Homo sapiens crafted tiny masterpieces from the simplest of materials. Step inside the cave's cool embrace and feel the breeze carrying salt-sweet tang across your skin. Your headlamp's beam dances over walls streaked with calcite and ochre, revealing crescent-shaped shelters carved by centuries of wind and wave. Underfoot, the sandy floor is studded with fragments of shell and bone, silent witnesses to camps long since abandoned. And there, half buried in fine-grained sediment, you discover a string of curved ivory-white beads, perforated nacreous shells, each no larger than a fingertip, worn smooth by handling and time. These shell beads, unearthed alongside engraved ochre and finely crafted tools, stand among the earliest known forms of personal adornment. Mainstream archaeologists date them by luminescence to around 75,000 BC. tens of thousands of years before any known European ornaments. The beads were painstakingly selected for their size and shape, then napped at one end with a sharp flake of stone to fashion a tiny hole. Under magnification, microstriations attest to hours of steady work, grinding, drilling, and polishing until each shell could be strung on a cord and worn close to the body. Why go to such lengths? In a hunter-gatherer society where survival was paramount, decoration might seem a frivolity. Yet these beads reveal a profound shift, personal identity expressed through adornment. Perhaps they signified group affiliation, clans gathering seasonally along the coast, each marking its members with distinctive patterns of shells. Or maybe individual status, proof of skill in crafting or access to prized resources. The very act of selecting shells from the tumultuous surf, transporting them inland, and transforming them into jewelry speaks to symbolic thought and social communication. Imagine the artisan crouched on the cave's sandy floor, torchlight flickering against the bare walls. Fingers calloused from flint napping brush away sand as a shell is held in place against a stone anvil. A tiny flint point rasps at the edge, sending up a mist of shell dust. Each bead emerges as a testament to patience and precision, a tangible link between maker and wearer, between the practical world of tool-making and the intangible realm of meaning. Beyond Blombos, shell beads appear at sites across Africa and the Levant, but nowhere in such early abundance. Their distribution invites questions of exchange and travel. Did groups journey along the coast, trading beads and stories at seasonal gatherings? Chemical analyses show that some shells bear traces of pigments, red ochre adhering in the perforations, suggesting that the finished beads may have been stained, their color intensified to catch the firelight. Was this a purely decorative choice, or did specific hues carry coded messages, marking rites of passage, mating eligibility, or seasonal festivals? Scholars have speculated that these early ornaments functioned as a proto-language, combinations of shell size, color, and pattern encoding information about origin, achievements, or social bonds. A necklace of tiny shells might speak of a woman's prowess in gathering coastal foods. A bracelet of larger beads might denote a hunter's successful expedition. In this view, personal ornamentation becomes a mobile record-keeping system, a spoken word rendered in shell and string. Yet for all we can analyze, microscopic wear patterns, pigment residues, spatial distribution, the beads keep their secrets well. We cannot know the precise words they spoke, nor the melodies they accompanied. We can only sense the human impulse behind them, the desire to connect, to communicate, and to craft beauty even in a world governed by Ice Age cold and uncertainty. Fringe theories push these ideas further. Some propose that bead-making rituals were integral to shamanic ceremonies, the beads serving as talismans in journeys between worlds. Others argue that the shells were not merely strung, but woven into clothing or tapestries hung within the cave's deepest chambers, early attempts at prehistoric art installations. While the archaeological record offers no direct evidence for such elaborate displays, the notion underscores the beads' potential roles beyond mere jewelry. In the dim shelter of Blombos, these shell fragments also pose questions about gender and labor. Ethnographic studies hint that in many hunter-gatherer societies, beadwork is associated with women's roles in creating and sustaining communal ties. If similar patterns held in the Middle Stone Age, the Blombos beads may be heirs to a lineage of female artisans whose expertise blended aesthetic skill with social influence. Yet without written records, such interpretations remain speculative, reminding us of the fragile boundaries between evidence and imagination. As modern researchers sift through the cave's sediments, every new bead fragment, every ochre-stained shard, reshapes our understanding of early human complexity. Portable X-ray fluorescence reveals that some pigments used on shells originated from deposits over 50 kilometers away, indicating deliberate pigment collection and long-range movement. Each bead, then, becomes proxy evidence for wide-ranging networks of travel and exchange. Standing at the cave's threshold, with the roar of the ocean returning to our ears, the shell beads glimmer like buried stars at our feet. They remind us that art and identity are intertwined, that our ancestors projected their inner lives onto objects as small and exquisite as these shells. And yet, for all the insights they yield, the beads hold fast to their mysteries. Who wore them? What stories did they carry? What songs accompanied the clink of shells on string? The answers remain hidden beneath layers of sand and time, waiting for patient discovery. Yet as we turn our gaze back to the dark chamber, bearing the faintest glint of shell and ochre, we sense that within these humble beads lies a profound truth about human nature. The earliest artists were not merely makers of tools and art, but makers of meaning itself, binding together survival and symbolism in a single, delicate strand. What other messages, woven in shell and pigment, lie buried in the silent depths of Blombos Cave? And what will they tell us about the first chapters of human culture? The next fragment turned may bring us closer, but for now, the bead's soft glow lingers as an invitation to explore the depths of our own prehistoric imagination. And as the last flicker of shell beads drifts from our senses, we turn our steps eastward, into the mist-shrouded hills of southwestern China, where a narrow gorge carved by centuries of rainfall guards one of the most tantalizing enigmas of the end of the Ice Age. Imagine hiking beneath the canopy of dense evergreen forest, the air thick with humidity and the distant call of unseen birds. A narrow trail leads to a rocky overhang, its ceiling spattered with lichen and stalactites. In the dim light of your headlamp, you glimpse a shallow chamber where fragments of bone lie scattered among charcoal-stained stones. This is Red Deer Cave, named not for the animal remains found here, but for the reddish hue of the limestone walls, bathed in the dawn's first glow. In the late 2010s, archaeologists unearthed human skull fragments, molars and jawbones here, remains dated by radiocarbon and uranium series methods to roughly 14,500 to 11,500 BC. At first, the bones seemed unremarkable. Teeth worn by diet, a skull cap marred by post-depositional cracks. Yet careful analysis revealed features unlike any known Homo sapiens or Neanderthal. The mandible is broad and robust, with a heavy chin receded into a flat face. The brain case is low and tumid. Molars are large, their roots flared. Could these remains belong to a previously unknown hominin, a late surviving lineage echoing archaic traits long thought extinct? Mainstream researchers urge caution. The morphological quirks may reflect adaptation to diet or small population size, not a distinct species. After all, Pleistocene populations in East Asia experienced isolation and genetic drift, potentially exaggerating ancestral features. The cave's occupants hunted deer and boar, roasted tubers on open hearths, and fashioned simple stone tools, activities consistent with other Upper Paleolithic cultures. Yet the anatomical anomalies resist easy explanation. Why did these people retain robust jaws and pronounced brow ridges when their contemporaries in Europe and West Asia had evolved more graceful forms? Walking among the exposed sediment layers, you notice cut marks on red deer bones, evidence of butchery and processing. The butchering patterns match those at nearby Homo sapiens sites, hinting at shared subsistence strategies. But no ornaments, no symbolic carvings or pigments accompany the human bones. Does the absence of artistic expression suggest a culturally isolated group? Or have we simply not found their beads and engravings yet? The silence of the finds deepens the enigma. A people who lived alongside emerging modern human traditions, but left behind no clear markers of identity. Speculative voices suggest a more sensational possibility, that the Red Deer Cave hominins are the final echoes of the Denisovans, a mysterious sister group known only from DNA extracted in Siberia and Tibet. Genetic studies show that Denisovan admixture persists in modern Melanesians and some Southeast Asian populations, but no Denisovan remains beyond Siberia have ever been identified. Could these Chinese cave dwellers represent the southern frontier of that archaic lineage, surviving in ecological niches far from the glacial heartlands? The thought invites thrilling possibilities and equally daunting challenges, for without recoverable DNA, the question remains unanswerable. Others propose that the Red Deer Cave people stand as an entirely new branch of humanity, a relic population that split from the Homo sapiens lineage hundreds of thousands of years ago and kept to hidden valleys until millennia later. If so, their late survival to 11,500 BC, when agriculture was sweeping Southwest Asia and sedentary villages were rising, would rewrite our understanding of human diversity in the late Pleistocene. It would mean that far-flung pockets of archaic hominins persisted side by side with fully modern peoples, perhaps interacting, trading, or even interbreeding in ways we have yet to detect. The cave's setting adds to the intrigue. Red Deer Cave lies atop a limestone plateau, its entrance overlooking a steep drop into lowland river valleys. In the depths of winter, the plateau's temperatures dip below freezing at night, while summer rains swell the rivers, isolating the site for weeks at a time. Such environmental extremes could have sheltered a small population, protecting them from incursions of other groups and preserving ancient ways of life. Did they retreat to the cave seasonally, following the migrations of deer herds? Or did they dwell there year-round, mastering the challenges of both cold and monsoon? Within the excavated trenches, red deer antlers and horse bones cluster around hearth pits, suggesting organized butchery zones. Yet stone tools are few, a handful of simple blades and scrapers made from locally quarried silkreed. The absence of long-distance raw materials implies a relatively insular existence, one rooted firmly in the cave's immediate surroundings. If these were indeed a distinct hominin group, did they trade with neighboring Homo sapiens bands, or did they choose solitude over exchange? Fringe theories dance on the edge of plausibility, hinting at ritual uses of the cave. Perhaps the scattered bones represent mortuary practices, the dead left in place to join ancestral spirits. But no deliberate burials, no arranged positions or grave goods have been documented. Instead, the bones lie in disarray, many fragments broken and burned. Could cannibalism explain this pattern, as practiced by some prehistoric communities during periods of scarcity? The butcher marks on human bones are subtle and debated. Ethical and methodological considerations temper any rush to judgment. What we do know is that Red Deer Cave hominins challenge our tidy categories. They force us to ask, are we the sole survivors of a once diverse human family tree? Or were there cousins walking Earth alongside us far later than we ever imagined? And if so, what stories of contact, competition, or cooperation remain hidden in our genomes and in the silent depths of caves like this? As you step back into the humid air outside the cave entrance, the distant chatter of cicadas resumes, and sunlight glints off jade-green leaves. The cave's mouth, now dark and still, offers no final answers, only the promise of further discovery. What other human legacies lie buried in the world's hidden crevices, waiting to give us chills with their revelations? The bones of Red Deer Cave remind us that the story of humanity is far from complete, and that in the silence of forgotten chambers, the deepest mysteries of our past still await their voice. And as the final echoes of Red Deer Cave's silent occupants fade beneath the forest canopy, we turn our gaze to a quieter, more intimate testament of prehistoric ritual, burial sites where the very shape of human skulls seems to have been molded by unseen hands. Picture a wind-swept plateau above the great bend of the Tigris River, where the desert's ochre light fades into a cobalt twilight. Here, in the low mound of what is now northeastern Syria, archaeologists have uncovered a series of graves dating to roughly 7,000 BC. Beneath simple stone slabs lie the remains of men, women, and children, skulls adorned not by chance but by careful design, their foreheads gently flattened, their faces elongated in subtle, deliberate curves. At first glance, these deformations appear slight, almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. Yet osteologists note a consistent pattern. Boards or bandages would have pressed against infants' soft skulls for months, guiding bone growth into a new form. The process demanded foresight and patience, a choice to reshape a person's very appearance long before they could comprehend it themselves. But why undertake such an intrusive transformation? Mainstream scholars propose that cranial modification functioned as a marker of social identity. In a world where village membership, clan affiliation, or familial lineage determined access to resources and protection, a visibly altered skull could broadcast one's belonging from across a room or across a dusty plain. Perhaps the flattened forehead signified initiation into a cult, a rite of passage marking the transition from childhood to adulthood under the watchful eyes of elders. Or maybe the elongated cranium denoted a prestigious lineage, each generation striving to distinguish itself in an era of burgeoning competition for fertile land and water. Imagine the ceremony at which this molding began. A mother cradles her newborn within a swaddle, a soft board placed gently against the child's head. As the days lengthen and the infant's bones yield under gentle pressure, midwives or family elders monitor progress, tightening bindings just enough to encourage bone growth without causing harm. In the hush of tents or primitive shelters, the softly creaking ties mark the passage of time as surely as the slow turning of the seasons. Yet even as we accept these practical explanations, deeper questions surface. How did this practice arise in the first place? Did a visionary healer discover that infants' malleable skulls could be shaped by consistent pressure, perhaps first as a remedial technique for cranial injuries, and then transform it into a cultural emblem? Or did the shaping of skulls emerge spontaneously in multiple regions, a convergent solution to the universal human desire to embellish and distinguish the self? Evidence from graves in the Pontic steppe, in the valleys of the Orinoco, and atop the Tibetan plateau suggests that cranial deformation was by no means confined to a single culture or epoch. In the Ukrainian steppe, at sites like Sredny Stog, c. 4500 BC, archaeologists have identified graves where skulls are not only flattened but also bound to produce a high, narrow shape, creating a head profile that seems to defy natural growth. Some skulls display mild deformation, others dramatic elongation. Did these differences reflect social ranking, the artistic whims of tribal leaders, or varying ideological beliefs about the body's ideal form? The lack of accompanying grave goods, few ornaments, no special offerings, adds to the mystery. The transformation of the skull itself becomes the most significant marker of identity. Speculative voices whisper of even more profound motivations. A handful of researchers suggest that cranial modification may have been connected to altered states of consciousness, an embodied ritual akin to vision quests, the reshaped skull symbolizing an expanded mind, capable of perceiving realms beyond the mundane. They point to shamanic traditions among later Siberian cultures, where head binding accompanied initiation ceremonies and the ingestion of psychoactive plants. While direct evidence for such rites among Neolithic farmers is lacking, the idea invites us to consider the hidden dimensions of this practice beyond mere social signaling. Some fringe theories press further into the uncanny, proposing that elongated skulls echo the physical attributes of deities or spirit beings depicted in contemporary rock art and pottery. In sites across Anatolia and Central Europe, geometric motifs, tall, narrow diamonds or chalice-like forms, appear alongside figurative art. Could these abstractions represent otherworldly entities with similarly shaped heads? If so, the modification of infant skulls might have been a way to align living humans with the divine, to embody the essence of mythic ancestors in mortal flesh. Yet for all our hypotheses, the voices of those who practiced skull shaping remain silent. We cannot ask them why they altered their children's forms, nor can we hear the songs or incantations that may have accompanied the process. We rely on fractured bone, on careful measurements of cranial vault angles, and on scattered burial contexts that offer only partial clues. Recent bioarchaeological studies have examined isotopes in teeth and bones, tracing individuals' diets and origins. In some cases, skull-altered individuals show signs of non-local childhoods, suggesting they were born in distant settlements and moved as part of marriage alliances or fosterage arrangements. This movement underscores the possibility that cranial shaping facilitated integration across communities. A bride arriving with a distinctive skull form, immediately recognizable as belonging to a particular clan, might carry both prestige and protection into her new village. At an excavation in the Andes, researchers encountered infant burials where the very grave pits were shaped to cradle the head in a molded depression, an architectural echo of the bindings themselves. The synergy between burial architecture and bodily modification hints at a worldview in which the body and the landscape were shaped in parallel, each reflecting the other in ritual and design. Standing before a reconstructed Neolithic burial display in a dimly lit museum hall, one sees the elongated skull silhouetted against a backdrop of pressed earth. It challenges our notions of identity and self-determination. A person born into a culture where the body itself is a canvas for communal expression, where individuality is both asserted and subsumed in the practice of cranial crafting. And so, as we leave behind the silent chamber of intentionally shaped skulls, one question lingers in the hushed air. What other intimate rituals, carried out in the half-light of prehistoric dwellings, remain hidden from our view? Rituals that shaped not just objects, but the very forms of human life itself. The answer lies buried in the earth, waiting for patient hands and open minds to bring it to light. And as the polished bindings of cranial transformation recede from our thoughts, we now turn our gaze to a quieter relic of Ice Age mind. Bones etched not by butchery alone, but by the steady hand of someone counting, marking, or perhaps invoking the unseen. Imagine the dawn light filtering through wisps of mist on the banks of the Semliki River, in the heart of what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. The air ripples with humidity, and the river's gentle murmur blends with the calls of waterbirds. Underfoot, the soil is soft with centuries of leaf litter. Amid the stones and shells, archaeologists in the mid-20th century uncovered a curious object, a slender piece of baboon fibula, its surface notched with a precise series of incisions. This is the Ishongo bone, dated by some estimates to as early as 20,000 BC, one of the oldest known artifacts bearing intentional markings. At first glance, the marks resemble simple tally marks, a human impulse as old as language itself. Yet closer examination reveals a more complex arrangement, groups of 3, 4, and 8 notches, separated by deliberate spaces. Mainstream interpretations suggest a counting tool, perhaps tracking moon phases, game captures, or seasonal cycles crucial to survival. In an era when written language lay millennia in the future, did this humble bone serve as a mnemonic device, a ledger of events etched in bone? But why choose such a fragile medium? The Ishongo bone's slender profile belies its importance. Each notch was gouged with a sharp flint edge, the groove's width and depth remarkably uniform. Imagine the artisan crouched by firelight, torch smoke curling around shoulders, finger on each incision, breathing measured and deliberate. Was the act of engraving itself part of a ritual, a meditative practice linking maker to memory? Across Africa, similar discoveries add depth to the mystery. In the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco, notched bones from the Assyrian tradition, some dating to 80,000 BC, display parallel incisions, though their patterning is simpler, more repetitive. At Blombos Cave on the southern coast, engraved ochre pieces from 75,000 BC bear rows of cross-hatched lines, hinting at a shared impulse to externalize thought in abstract form. Are these instances independent inventions or markers of a pan-African cognitive revolution? The Symbolic Basin's other finds offer intriguing context. Nearby stone tools and ochre scraps speak of a community attuned to both the practical and the symbolic. Shell beads, pigment residues, and carved bone points populate the same layers. Could the notched bone have been strung alongside beads as a talisman, its markings conveying lineage or status? Or did it rest beside hearths as a communal calendar, its incisions reset with each new moon? The absence of accompanying inscriptions leaves us with tantalizing questions. Speculative voices press further. Some researchers propose that the notches encode numerical knowledge, simple arithmetic operations or prime number sequences, hinting at an abstract understanding of mathematics long before formal notation. The pattern of 3, 4, and 8 has been read by a few as evidence of doubling and division, a glimpse of prehistoric numeracy. Yet we cannot confirm intent. Are we projecting modern frameworks onto ancient marks, or uncovering genuine precursors to calculation? Others suggest that the notches carried ritual power. In many cultures, marks on sacred objects serve as portals between the living and the dead. Could the Ishango bone have been used in divination, its incisions consulted by shamans seeking guidance for the hunt or the monsoon? The rhythmic act of tallying, of touching each groove, might have induced trance states, blurring boundaries between material record and spiritual rite. Fringe theories take us even deeper into speculation. Some propose that the markings represent a proto-writing system, an embryonic script conveying syllables or concepts rather than numbers. Their advocates point to the irregular groupings and variable orientations of the notches, suggesting semantic significance. But without a Rosetta Stone of prehistory, such interpretations remain evocative but unprovable. What we do know is that the notched bones embody a profound cognitive shift. They demand planning, sustained attention, and the conception of permanence. The understanding that symbols, etched into bone, can outlast the life of their creator and communicate across generations. In the flicker of campfires, families may have gathered around the bone, tracing each incision with curious fingers, recalling past events, or sharing stories etched into the grooves. The Ishango bone's journey from discovery to display has been nearly as complex as its origin. It surfaced in a Belgian museum's storeroom after World War II, its significance obscured by more immediately striking artifacts. It was only decades later, with advances in dating methods and renewed interest in cognitive archaeology, that scholars recognized its potential importance. In the hushed corridors of academic debate, the bone became a symbol of humanity's deep past, one slender object challenging our perceptions of prehistoric intelligence. Today, replicas of the Ishango bone rest in labs and lecture halls, but the original lies protected behind glass, its notches illuminated by focused spotlights. Visitors lean close, instinctively counting the incisions, then pausing to wonder what they truly signify. The bone resists easy interpretation, its meanings layered like the soil that once enveloped it. As we step away from the display case, the subtle click of camera shutters fades, and we imagine the damp riverbanks where the bone first lay buried. We hear the Semliki's gentle current murmuring over stone, as it has for millennia. And in that soft susurration, one question persists. What other silent markers of ancient thought lie hidden in Africa's layered sediments? Bones or stones waiting to whisper the story of humanity's first attempts at symbol and memory. For now, the notched bones remain both record and riddle, their true purpose locked in the grooves of time. What other chapters of prehistoric cognition await our discovery, and how will these humbled tally marks reshape our understanding of the dawn of human thought? And as the tally marks on ancient bones fade into memory, we turn our gaze to a place where survival depended on more than simple foraging, where ingenuity met wilderness in a dance of precision and peril. Welcome to Dolní Věstonice, a windswept plain on the edge of the upper Paleolithic world, where Ice Age hunters honed their craft against giants. Imagine standing on a frost-hardened meadow beside a sluggish river, the sky a slate-gray canopy pierced by the breath of mammoth herds. In the distance, smoke curls from the mouths of clay and turf dwellings, the remnants of a settlement occupied as early as 30,000 BC. Nearby, a pit filled with shattered bones, saber-toothed cats, woolly rhinos, and, most astonishingly, dozens of mammoth tusks, marks the site of a singular achievement, not simply the hunt of one great beast, but a systematic campaign against entire herds. Mainstream archaeologists describe Dolní Věstonice as a hub of innovation. Here, hunters turned mammoth ivory into exquisite figurines, tiny renderings of bison, bears, and birds. But they also wielded that same ivory in the hunt, fashioning barbed points and foreshafts designed for maximum penetration. Flint blades lay scattered like fallen leaves, their edges honed to deadly sharpness. Hearths ringed with stone and bone testify to communal feasts, where every scrap of meat and marrow was shared beneath the flicker of firelight. Yet it is the traces of large-scale drives that capture our imagination. At several kill zones around the settlement, archaeologists have uncovered bone beds stretching over 10 meters, where mammoth skeletons lie in disarray as though toppled by an unseen hand. The uniform orientation of tusks and legs suggests deliberate placement. Perhaps the beasts were funneled into shallow pits concealed by brush, where spears could pierce slowly after the animals stumbled into traps. How did these hunters lure such massive creatures into ambush? Experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate these drives, using wooden stakes and low walls of brush to channel herds across open ground. Their trials hint at the power of coordinated movement. A line of sound, crackling fires, rhythmic shaking of bone rattles might have nudged mammoths toward narrow funnels. In the pale dawn, dozens of hunters crouched at the edges, ready to thrust spears into the thick hides. Such an operation would have required precise timing and disciplined teamwork, an understanding of animal behavior as acute as any tracker's knowledge today. Intriguing clues emerge from cut marks on the bones themselves. Mammoth vertebrae show systematic incisions at consistent angles, evidence that butchers worked swiftly, removing limbs in standardized sections. The arrangement of hearths across the site implies specialized stations. One group roasting ribs, another extracting tongues and brains, a division of labor that points to communal planning on a grand scale. Did elders assign roles by age or skill? Did young apprentices learn the art of ivory carving alongside the secrets of mammoth anatomy? Beyond the practical, whispers of ritual envelop the hunt. In one shelter, 3 mammoth skulls, each with the tusks removed and carefully placed upright, form a triangular shrine facing the sunrise. Between them lie ochre-stained stones and fragments of red deer antler. Some scholars see evidence of a ceremonial thanksgiving for the fallen beasts, a rite to honor their spirits before the meat was touched. But the exact meaning remains hidden. Were these skull altars a plea for future hunting success, or memorials for particularly formidable prey? Fringe theories venture even deeper into speculation. A few suggest that Dolní Věstonice's hunters harnessed natural gas seeps, trapped pockets of methane rising from the ground, to create low flames or smoky barriers, driving mammoths with sudden walls of fire and haze. While geochemical surveys have yet to confirm such seeps, the idea underscores the hunters' willingness to manipulate their environment in ingenious ways. Similarly, some argue that the settlement's position on migratory routes was no accident, but the product of careful scouting and intergenerational knowledge passed down like a map etched into memory. What we do know is that Dolní Věstonice was not a place of ad hoc kills, but a long-term staging ground for complex subsistence strategies. Seasonal patterns emerge from isotope analyses of human and animal remains. In spring, herds passed through the floodplain en route to summer pastures. In autumn, hunters returned to process carcasses under shallow snows. The settlement's inhabitants seem to have synchronized their lives with the mammoths, orchestrating hunts at the moment when weakened calves or aging bulls were most vulnerable. In the flickering glow of replicated hearths, modern researchers ponder the social dynamics behind these achievements. A successful mammoth hunt could feed dozens for weeks, reinforcing bonds of reciprocity and trust essential in small groups. The exchange of meat and marrow created allegiances that extended beyond kin, forging alliances with neighboring bands. Could Dolní Věstonice have served as a regional capital, a gathering place where disparate clans negotiated marriages, shared news of distant caves, and celebrated the harvest of mammoth flesh? Yet, for all we uncover, mysteries endure. No written record accompanies these feats, only bones and stones to whisper of triumph and risk. We cannot hear the calls of hunters stalking their prey, nor feel the tremor of a tumbling tusk as mammoth fell under the weight of dozens of thrust spears. We glimpse their world through fragments, ivory tips lodged in vertebrae, hearth arrangements etched in ash, skull shrines standing as silent sentinels of vanished rites. As you step away from the excavated trenches, where the wind still carries the faint echo of mammoth trumpets, you sense the enormity of what these hunters achieved. They faced creatures 40 times their weight, yet they prevailed through cunning, cooperation, and a deep understanding of the natural world. What other secrets lie buried in the slopes and riverbanks of Dolní Věstonice? What rhythms of hunt and feast, of ritual and survival, remain waiting beneath layers of sediment? The shadow of the mammoth looms large in our imagination, but the true depth of prehistoric strategy lies hidden in the silent spaces between bone and breath, between the flicker of torchlight and the dawn of a new day. The answers, like the mammoth herds themselves, may return only to those patient enough to follow their tracks into the mists of time. And as the echoes of mammoth hunts fade into the windswept plains of Dolní Věstonice, our path leads us southward, to the misty hills of northern Croatia, where the rocky cliffs above the Krapina River guard secrets of another kind of prehistoric mastery. Imagine stepping into the cool entrance of Cosquer Cave, its floor carpeted with centuries of bat guano and scattered limestone rubble. A filtered shaft of sunlight cuts through the gloom, illuminating a small cluster of bones arranged on a raised ledge. Beneath your lamp, 6 eagle talons, each nearly 10 centimeters long, glint with an otherworldly luster. Their curved, obsidian-dark tips remain remarkably intact, but nearer the base you notice something extraordinary: fine grooves, worn polish, and microscopic cut marks that speak of deliberate human craftsmanship. These talons date to roughly 130,000 BC, and they bear the unmistakable signature of Neanderthal hands. Mainstream researchers have identified incisions at consistent angles, evidence that flesh and sinew were removed with stone tools, and smoothing along the upper surfaces, suggesting each talon was strung or stitched into place, perhaps on leather, wood, or sinew cord. But why would Neanderthals expend precious effort transforming the claws of Europe's largest birds of prey into objects of adornment? Some archaeologists propose that these talons served as early jewelry, worn as pendants or bracelets to convey status, group affiliation, or individual achievement. The eagle, a symbol of vision and power today, may have held similar resonance for Neanderthals. In a world where survival depended on keen eyes and swift reflexes, wearing the talons of such a creature could have signified a hunter's prowess, or invoked the bird's spirit to guide its wearer through the perils of Ice Age forests. Picture the artisan at work, crouched beside a smoldering hearth, shadows dancing across the rough cave walls. A fractured griffin-vulture bone provides the raw material. Flint flakes split the desired pieces, then scrape away residual tissue. Fingers trace each curve, feeling for burrs and polishing them smooth against a leather patch or sandstone. With each pass, the talon gleams, its surface catching the firelight like a dark star. When the final notch is cut, the artifact transforms, from a remnant of prey to a crafted symbol. Yet beyond straightforward adornment, deeper mysteries linger. Were the talons strung into necklaces worn at communal gatherings, their rhythmic clinks underscoring Neanderthal chants or rituals? Or were they attached to garments, capes, or headdresses, worn by leaders or shamans in ceremonies marking seasonal shifts or rites of passage? The cave yields no direct evidence of associated pigments or decorative attachments, but the placement of talon fragments alongside ochre-stained tools hints at ritual contexts. Speculative voices whisper of shamanic practice, that Neanderthals, like many later hunter-gatherer groups, sought trance states to communicate with animal spirits. The eagle's soaring flight and keen vision might have embodied a bridge between earth and sky, life and afterlife. In this reading, the crafted talons become more than jewelry. They become talismans, each groove a conduit for power, each polished stroke a sacred act. But without cave paintings or explicit iconography, such ideas remain tantalizingly out of reach. Fringe theories venture even further. Some suggest that the talons were part of an early proto-script, each notch or polish representing a spoken syllable or clan symbol, arranged in sequences only understood by initiated members. The precision of the cut marks, too uniform for random trimming, lends a semblance of patterning that invites such interpretation. Yet with only a handful of talons uncovered, we lack the broader corpus needed to decode any messages they might carry. Contextual clues deep in the cave reinforce the aura of mystery. The Krapina site has yielded over 1,000 Neanderthal bones, some bearing evidence of defleshing and purposeful breakage, practices that may hint at mortuary rites or cannibalistic episodes during harsh winters. The talons rest amid these remains, perhaps removed from eagle carcasses brought into the cave alongside human victims of circumstance. Did Neanderthals see a parallel between predatory birds and their own place at the top of the food chain? Or did they revere the eagle as both ally and adversary? Microscopic residue analysis reveals faint traces of ochre within the talon grooves, suggesting they may once have been painted a dull red. Ochre's ubiquity in Neanderthal sites points to its role as a symbolic medium, used in burials, body painting, and the decoration of tools. Could coloring the talons have enhanced their visual impact, intensifying their ritual potency or asserting group identity at a glance? Beyond Krapina, similar modified eagle talons have surfaced at other Neanderthal sites across Europe, from the Italian Grotta di Fuman to the Croatian Vindiga Cave, hinting that this practice was not an isolated curiosity. The geographic spread suggests a shared tradition or parallel emergence of symbolic behavior among disparate Neanderthal bands. This challenges long-held assumptions that symbolic adornment was unique to Homo sapiens and compels us to reevaluate the cognitive capacities of our extinct cousins. Yet despite these tantalizing hints, key questions remain unanswered. How were the talons displayed? On cords around the neck, sewn into headgear, or fixed to bone or wooden handles? What significance did each talon's size or curvature hold? Did larger claws denote higher status, or were all talons treated equally? And crucially, what social or spiritual function did these objects serve in a world devoid of written record? Imagine the nights in Krapina Cave centuries ago. Torches flickering, talon-adorned figures moving in semi-darkness, the low hum of communal life punctuated by the sharp snap of a stone tool. Each crafted talon a testament to the Neanderthal's capacity for abstract thought, for transforming the raw teeth of nature into objects laden with intention and identity. Today, in museum displays and academic papers, the Krapina talons stand as silent ambassadors of a prehistoric world. They serve as tangible proof that Neanderthal creativity extended beyond survival mechanics, reaching into the realms of art and ritual. And yet, for all our analysis, cut mark measurements, residue assays, comparative site studies, the full story of these talons remains hidden in the silent passageways of the cave. As you turn away from the display of darkened claws, the cave's hush seems to linger in your ears. What other symbolic artifacts lie buried in the depths of Krapina and beyond? What further expressions of Neanderthal imagination await discovery, ready to give us chills by reshaping our understanding of human history? The answers lie in the shadows, waiting for patient explorers to bring them back to the light. And as the echo of eagle talons fades into the misty hush of Krapina Cave, we turn our gaze southward, beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, to a hidden chamber where the secrets of an ancient shoreline lie preserved in dripping limestone. Imagine descending through a submerged corridor, the water warming as you swim beyond tidal currents. At last, you emerge into a low-ceilinged vault, its walls etched with images no dry cave could reveal. Creatures of the deep, thousands of years before the art of the sea would grace any map. Here, at the mouth of what is now Calanque de Morgiou near Marseille, lies Cosquer Cave, a Pleistocene gallery rendered both in rock and salt water. Flickering torchlight would once have guided Ice Age artists along these damp walls. Their pigments, reds from iron-rich ochre, blacks from burnt manganese, adhered to surfaces perpetually slick with drips of mineral-laden spray. Among the more familiar bison and horses, Cosquer's most haunting images are those drawn from the deep. A pair of intertwined sea urchins rendered in dot clusters, spines radiating in careful symmetry. Long, undulating eels slinking past lines of crustacean-like shapes. And perhaps most strikingly, a group of fish so elongated, so otherworldly in form, they seem half creature, half phantom. Mainstream scholars propose that these marine depictions reflect coastal foragers familiar with the water's bounty, divers gathering shells and fish, perhaps even spearing seals from lurking canoes of hide and bone. The Ice Age shoreline lay more than a kilometer closer than today, exposing tidal flats and kelp forests teeming with life. But would hunters of reindeer and ibex also risk the sea's chill for crayfish and mussels? What drove these inland artists to paint the beasts of the underworld rather than terrestrial game? Imagine the artist crouched on a natural ledge, torch in hand, inhaling the brine-laden air. Each stroke had to be swift. The tide's whisper warned of encroaching water. The black curves of an octopus-like form were incised with a burned stick, its arms curling into sucker-like pads. Nearby, scallop shells found in the cave attest to their extraction from shallows. Did these shellfish serve as snacks during long nights of painting, fueling the creative impulse? Or did their shapes elicit mimicry on stone, an act of homage to the sea's hidden riches? Yet even as we recognize the practical knowledge embedded in these works, accurate representations of species known from paleontological remains, we must confront deeper puzzles. Why were some images placed in chambers accessible only during extreme low tides, when the cave mouth lay fully above water? The artists must have tracked seasonal rhythms, returning at the ebb to renew these paintings. Could the ritual repetition of diving and painting have bonded small bands, forging communal identity through shared risk and artistry? Speculative voices invite us to imagine the paintings as more than illustrations, as portals to a watery realm of spirit and myth. In many later Mediterranean cultures, sea creatures embody transformation, fish as symbols of fertility, urchins as guardians of hidden knowledge. Did Upper Paleolithic artists intone chants as they traced eels' sinuous bodies, invoking the sea's mysteries? The cave's acoustics amplify every drip and echo. Perhaps these sounds were woven into ceremonies that blurred the line between art and incantation. Fringe theories dare to suggest that some forms, elongated sea monsters with human-like faces, reflect encounters not just with marine life, but with visions induced by plant toxins or sensory deprivation. Anthropologists note parallels in ethnographic accounts where repetitive drumming and rhythmic movement yield trance states, populated by hybrid creatures. Could the Cosquer eels be half dream, half creature? A testament to altered consciousness beneath vaulted stone? The evidence is elusive, yet the image's uncanny quality stirs questions beyond the purely zoological. The interplay of rock and water ensures that many paintings have vanished beneath rising seas, swallowed by millennia of gradual submergence. The fragile survivors cling in pockets above tidal reach, their colors muted but legible under expert conservation. Every newly exposed speck of ochre or black pigment brings delight tinged with melancholy. Each fragment underscores the transience of human expression against the slow march of geological change. Today, Cosquer Cave remains accessible only to specialized divers, its depths closed to casual visitation. In a dim, pressurized vault, researchers painstakingly map every groove and stain, piecing together a submerged panorama that once captivated Ice Age eyes. And yet, for all our documentation, the full meaning of these deep-sea visions remains tantalizingly out of reach. What other secrets lie hidden in Cosquer's flooded passages, images awaiting rediscovery in remote alcoves? And what will they reveal about the ancient bonds between humans and the sea, forged in trembling torchlight and the silent pulse of tidal rhythm? The answers lie in the water's depths and the drips of mineral time, challenging us to dive ever deeper into the mysteries of our prehistoric past. And as the dark waves of Cosquer Cave's hidden gallery recede behind our minds, we now journey southward to sunlit plains and rocky overhangs, where another canvas awaits, the patterned shells of Africa's largest bird. Picture the rugged expanse of the Western Cape, where wind-swept fynbos gives way to thorn thickets and parched riverbeds. In the shelter of Deep Kloof Rock Shelter, high Cedarburg Mountains loom overhead, their weathered walls stained by centuries of mineral seepage. Here, fragments of ostrich eggshell, sturdier than they first appear, lie scattered among hearth ash and stone tools. Each shard bears incised lines, bands of parallel strokes, cross-hatched grids, and lozenge shapes so precise they seem almost mathematical in design. These decorated shells date to roughly 60,000 to 100,000 BC, making them among the oldest known examples of abstract patterning anywhere in the world. Mainstream archaeologists interpret them as water containers, eggshells broken, emptied, and then heated or glued back together with bitumen to form small canteens. The incisions probably served practical ends, improving grip on heated surfaces or indicating volume marks. Yet the care with which the patterns were executed hints at a deeper significance. These are not mere tally marks, but deliberate designs, echoing across generations. Imagine the artisan at work, crouched over the cracked shell, torchlight flickering against the rough overhang. With a sharp flint flake held in one hand and the shell in the other, the maker draws a series of equidistant lines, the tip biting just deep enough to leave a clear groove without puncturing the delicate vault. Each stroke requires steady nerves and intimate knowledge of ostrich shell's layered structure. The result is a rhythmic interplay of light and shadow on the curved surface, a tactile register of intent. Beyond the practical, these patterns may have conferred social meaning. In many hunter-gatherer societies, pottery and containers carry ownership marks or clan symbols. Could the incised grids at Diepkloof have signified group affiliation or seasonal rounds, markers that told other bands, "These shells belong to the people of the West Ridge"? Perhaps different motifs, tightly spaced chevrons versus broader lozenges, denoted marital status, territorial rights, or age sets. The uniformity of certain designs across multiple fragments suggests a shared visual vocabulary, a proto-heraldry etched in shell. Yet questions sharpen when we consider the contexts of discovery. Patterned fragments appear not only amid everyday refuse, but also near hearths that pulse with ritual undertones. Beneath layers of soot and crushed stone, some incised shells rest atop flat slabs, as if displayed rather than discarded. Others lie next to ochre-stained tools, hints that pigment may once have filled the grooves, making the designs glow red against pale shell. In the half-light of flickering fires, these painted patterns could have taken on an almost magical presence, guiding communal gatherings or serving as mnemonic devices for origin stories. Speculative voices invite us to imagine these engraved shells as components of a lost symbolic system, a proto-writing that recorded seasonal events or mythic cycles. The repetition of line counts, groups of 5 parallel incisions interrupted by a void, mirrors tally sticks used by later pastoralists to track lunar months or migratory herds. Could the Diepkloof patterns mark the phases of the moon or the arrival of seasonal rains? Did mothers teach their daughters to read the shells, tracing each groove with fingertips as they recited ancestral tales? While no definitive Rosetta shell has emerged, the possibility lingers that these eggshells carried messages far richer than simple utility. Fringe theories press even further into conjecture. A few researchers propose that the cross-hatched diamonds encode genealogical charts, a map of familial lines crossing and diverging through time. The mathematical symmetry of some panels has been likened to geometric puzzles, suggesting an abstract logic at work. Yet, without corroborating patterns or oral traditions, such interpretations remain seductive but unprovable. The shell's silence forces us to confront the limits of archaeology. For every groove measured, countless stories go untold. What we can observe is the blending of art and survival. Ostrich eggs, once vessels of life, housing the enormous yolk that nourishes hatchlings, were transformed into vessels of memory and meaning. The cracked shells, reborn as flasks, carried water across arid landscapes. Their surfaces recorded the hands that carried and decorated them. In each engraved fragment, we glimpse a mind capable of abstraction, pattern recognition, and symbolic thought, capacities that underpin the very notion of culture. As modern researchers sift through the shelter's sandy floors, every new fragment adds a stroke to the picture, but also deepens the mystery. How many distinct motifs existed, and what was their full repertoire of meanings? Did the patterns evolve over millennia, reflecting shifts in social structure, environment, or belief? And what other decorated shells, broken, buried, and forgotten, lie hidden beneath sediments yet to be uncovered. Standing at the mouth of the rock shelter, the faint echo of wind through mountain passes reminds us that time is both fragile and vast. These ostrich eggshells, once cracked open to feed a family, then painstakingly mended and etched, carry the lingering touch of artists who lived more than 500,000 seasons ago. Their patterns speak of water and survival, of identity and memory, and of a human impulse to leave a mark on the world. And so we step away from the engraved shards, the mind filled with images of geometric bands glowing faintly in torchlight. Yet the final question remains: what other silent symbols await discovery in Africa's hidden shelters? Symbols that may redefine the dawn of human creativity and invite us to trace, once more, the fragile line between utility and art. And as the etched echoes of ostrich eggshell patterns fade beneath the sunlit overhangs of Deep Kloof, we journey northeast, across the craggy expanses of Mesopotamia, to a shadowed cavern where life and death intertwined in unexpected grace. Imagine climbing a slope of broken limestone, the air growing cooler with each step until you stand before a yawning aperture half shrouded in vines. This is Shanidar Cave, perched on a ridge above the Little Zab River in what is now Iraqi Kurdistan. Inside, daylight yields to a hush broken only by the distant drip of groundwater. The floor slopes gently downward, layered in pale sediments that preserve the footprints of countless generations. And there, in a sheltered niche, lies the resting place of a man we know only as Shanidar IV, his skeleton reclining as though sleeping, his back propped against the stone wall. In the early 1960s, archaeologist Ralph Selecki and his team uncovered this burial dating to roughly 65,000 BC. Surrounding the skeleton were small heaps of pollen grains, daffodil, yarrow, spearleek, and other wildflowers native to the mountain meadows. Under a magnifying lens, the pollen appeared to have been deliberately placed, as though a bouquet of seasonal blooms lay pressed against the brow of the interred. How remarkable that a species once cast as brutish hunters should pause to honor one of their own with the beauty of flowers. Mainstream researchers interpret the Shanidar IV burial as evidence of symbolic behavior among Neanderthals, a capacity for ritual and perhaps belief in an afterlife. In harsh Ice Age winters, when survival demanded unremitting focus on shelter and sustenance, the act of gathering fragile blossoms would have required intention far beyond mere necessity. Did companions scale wind-whipped slopes to collect these blossoms at the moment they bloomed? Did they carry them in small leather pouches, protecting their delicate petals from frostbite and trampling? The very thought gestures toward a gentle reverence, a moment of mournful care in a world of danger. Yet questions linger in the cave's stillness. Could the pollen have washed into the burial niche through natural processes, blown by wind whirls or carried by burrowing rodents? Some skeptics argue that the pollen distribution is too sparse and uneven to confirm deliberate placement. Others point to the cave's open mouth, vulnerable to gusts that might drift flower dust inside. But the concentration of pollen around Shanidar IV's head and shoulders, absent in surrounding layers, lends weight to the argument for a purposeful offering. Consider the florist's labor in a Pleistocene landscape, the slender stalks of wild mustard gathered in spring rain, daffodils dug carefully beneath damp earth so their bulbs remained intact, yarrow pinned together with sinew. Each bloom would have carried its own meaning, perhaps tied to seasonal renewal, to healing, or to the unique traits of the departed. Did these early mourners choose flowers for colors that echoed the cave's ochre-stained walls? Or for scents meant to soothe the sorrowing, filling the cramped chamber with a sharp, comforting fragrance? Speculative voices suggest that the pollen-bearing flowers may have served not only as decoration, but as a form of botanical remedy. Modern herbalists value yarrow for its antiseptic and coagulant properties. Spear leek contains compounds now recognized for their anti-inflammatory effects. Could Shanidar IV have been laid to rest with healing plants intended to ward off decay, a rudimentary mortuary pharmacopoeia? In the shadowed hush of the cave, the line between medicinal and symbolic blurs, hinting at a knowledge of nature's properties that we are only now beginning to understand. Beyond Shanidar IV, other Neanderthal burials at the site reveal intriguing variations. Shanidar I, known as Nandi, was found with ribs of a young mountain goat lying atop his arms, perhaps a final meal for the journey beyond. Shanidar III's skull shows a large healed wound, evidence that Neanderthals cared for the injured among them. Together, these burials sketch a portrait of a community bound by compassion and ritual, a people who marked death with acts of remembrance rather than mere disposal. Fringe theories weave still more exotic possibilities. Some argue that the floral deposits represent an early form of Neanderthal totemism, each flower chosen to represent a clan emblem or the spirit animal of the deceased. Others propose that the cave itself served as an oracular shrine. The dead man's body and blossoms might have functioned as focal points for divination rituals, where shamans inhaled floral vapors to enter trance states and commune with ancestral spirits. Though tantalizing, such ideas remain beyond the reach of direct evidence and must be held lightly in the realm of informed speculation. What endures is the power of the image. A Neanderthal hand plucking a fragile bloom, pressing it gently into the soil beside a loved one's face. In that gesture lies a testament to emotions we recognize today: grief, remembrance, the desire to honor a fellow being. The flowers speak to a cognitive world filled not only with survival strategies, but with meaning, narrative, and aesthetic sensibility. Standing in the faint gloom of Shanidar Cave, one senses the delicate balance between scientific inquiry and the cavern's lingering mysteries. We can measure pollen counts, map sediment layers, and date bone collagen with exquisite precision. Yet we cannot hear the laughter or tears that accompanied the burial, nor the whispered words spoken between gatherers. The silent blossoms lie forever pressed against the stone grave, a mute offering whose full story dwells beyond the limits of the archaeological record. As you step back into the sharp air outside the cave, where spring flowers still sway on wind-scoured hills, you carry the image of Shanidar IV's floral tribute with you. It reminds us that the capacity for ritual, for empathy, and for symbolic thought extends deep into our shared human past. And yet, for all our discoveries, one question remains suspended in the cool breeze. What other acts of Neanderthal compassion and creativity lie hidden in the world's forgotten shelters, waiting to give us chills with their quiet revelations? And as the petals of Shanidar's funerary blooms fade into memory, we now journey across continents and epochs to a windswept basin where the very ground preserves moments from the deep past in stark, fossilized detail. Welcome to White Sands National Park, New Mexico, a place of shifting gypsum dunes and sun-bleached silhouettes where ancient footsteps lie frozen in time. Imagine standing on the edge of a dried lakebed at first light, the horizon a pale ribbon of silver as dawn's glow refracts off miles of gleaming white sands. Your footsteps whisper across the soft crust, and every breath carries the faint tang of minerals long submerged beneath shallow waters. Here and there, the surface is etched with oblong depressions, footprints so fresh in form they seem pressed by living souls just moments ago. Yet each print bears the patina of countless years, its edges adorned by tiny gypsum crystals that sparkle in the new sun. In 2021, researchers revealed a startling discovery: thousands of human footprints, dating to between 23,000 and 21,000 BC, preserved in the calcrete layer beneath shifting dunes. These impressions predate the Clovis culture by millennia and challenge long-held theories of when humans first set foot in North America. The tracks, made by men, women, and children, form trails across ancient mudflats, intermingled with the marks of now-extinct animals, mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. Mainstream archaeologists see in these fossilized prints clear evidence of a thriving Pleistocene community. Children's prints, tiny and toe-first, cluster near larger adult tracks, suggesting family groups exploring the lakeshore together. Some footprints overlap, paired like dance steps, hinting at gatherings for hunting or social ceremonies. The presence of animal tracks alongside human ones implies shared landscapes and perhaps cooperative interactions. Did humans follow mastodon herds to scavenge hides, or did they drive game toward watering holes where ambushes awaited? Picture the moment of imprinting. A Paleolithic child, barefooted and curious, steps from a wooden cradle onto the cool mud, toes splaying as the ground yields. A parent's boot, or rather a moccasin made of mammoth hide, follows, pressing sturdier impressions. Nearby, a hunter on horseback would be unthinkable. Instead, the footprints of a giant sloth wander by, its padded feet leaving crescent shapes, oblivious to human observers crouched in low grass. Each step suspended in time, each print a snapshot of an ordinary moment in an extraordinary era. Yet even as footprints reveal human presence, they deepen the mystery of those Ice Age wanderers. How did these early inhabitants survive glacial maxima in a harsh, arid environment? Lithic scatters and hearth sites are absent here, as water levels regularly oscillated, washing away many traces of camp life. The footprints stand as the primary testament, evidence of people moving through this landscape, but leaving few artifacts behind. Did they carry tools on lanyards, leaving no dropped blades? Or did they restrict their activities to soft sediment zones, preserving footprints but erasing stone debris? Speculative voices suggest the prints may memorialize more than daily routines. Could certain clusters mark sacred pilgrimages to the lake's edge, a site of seasonal renewal or spiritual revelation? In many hunter-gatherer societies, water sources hold ceremonial significance, places to honor ancestors or to ritually cleanse before hunts. The repetitive patterns of footprints radiating from central plazas hint at repeated visits to preferred spots. Did Ice Age peoples return year after year to perform rites beside the shimmering lake, guided by the constellations and the cycle of rains? Intriguingly, some human prints appear nearly twice the length of average feet, leading to fringe theories of giant hunters roaming the Pleistocene flats. Yet closer measurement suggests these elongated impressions are not evidence of mythical titans, but the result of deep mud yielding under shifting weight and slipping feet. As waterlogged sediment gave way, toes wandered, elongating the prints before they set. Still, the myth of giants persists, a testament to our fascination with the unknown and the desire to mythologize the ancient past. The footprints' preservation owes much to the lake's geologic cycles. During wetter periods, water pooled, soft mud captured impressions, and then rapid drying under a warming climate hardened the prints. Later, winds carried gypsum-rich dust that cemented footprints in place. Millennia passed as layers of dust and sediment hid these tracks from sight, until recent drought conditions exposed the hardened crust, revealing a world beneath our feet that had long slumbered. Modern investigators map the vast web of tracks using aerial drones and ground-penetrating radar, stitching together trails that stretch for kilometers. They trace paths where hunters may have stalked game or families walked to gather reeds and edible roots. Yet the complete network remains only partially revealed. Many tracks lie still buried beneath shifting dunes, awaiting dry seasons or targeted excavation for rediscovery. Among the more enigmatic finds are parallel sets of prints that diverge slightly in direction and spacing, suggesting two individuals walking side by side at a brisk pace. Is this a hunting duo flanking prey in coordinated pursuit? Or could it represent a teaching moment? Parent and adolescent learning survival skills, practicing silent movement across treacherous mud? Each pair of tracks invites us to imagine the lives behind them, the hopes of a family seeking water, the ambitions of hunters testing new techniques, the laughter of children chasing one another on the ancient lakeshore. Yet the footprints also raise profound questions about human migration. If people occupied white sands during the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets blocked northern corridors, did they arrive by coastal routes now submerged beneath the Gulf of Mexico? Or did they follow mountain passes now lost in the Rockies? The white sands prints serve as anchor points for reconstructing these epic journeys, yet they offer only tantalizing clues. We see where people moved, but not where they came from, or where they went next. Imagine a Pleistocene storyteller pausing by the lake's edge at sunset, tracing a finger along a child's footprint still fresh in the mud, whispering tales of journeys from distant lands, of the trials yet to come. That storyteller's voice is silent now, but the footprints endure as verses of an unspoken epic, waiting to be read by those patient enough to follow their contours. As you step away from the sun-glinted lake bed, the distant hiss of wind across gypsum flats fills your ears. The footprints recede beneath your feet, but their echoes linger in the mind's eye. Impressions of a vanished people who left behind no monuments, only their steps, etched in soft mud and hardened into stone. What other silent stories await discovery in the silt and sand of ancient lakes? Stories of families, hunters, and wanderers forging lives at the edge of a frozen world. The footprints at White Sands remind us that beneath our modern landscapes lie fragile records of human presence, ready to give us chills as they rewrite the beginning of our shared journey. And as the ghostly tracks of White Sands fade beneath the turbulence of the wind, we turn our gaze back across the Atlantic, north and east to the ancient woodlands of Eastern Europe, where the ivory bones of vanished giants bear the fingerprints of human creativity. Imagine standing on a wind-swept floodplain beside the meandering Dniester River, the air crisp with early frost. Beneath your feet, dark loam gives way to gravelly terraces, mammoth hunting grounds strewn with skeletal remains. Here, among fractured tusks and segmented vertebrae, lies a single femur fragment nearly a meter long, its surface etched with a series of parallel grooves. By torchlight in the late 19th century, villagers first noticed the curious incisions. Later excavations at sites like Kostenki and Mezirich confirmed more such finds. Bones not only broken for marrow, but deliberately engraved with delicate lines, arcs, and even faint zigzags. These engraved mammoth bones date to roughly 20,000 to 15,000 BC, belonging to the upper Paleolithic cultures known as Gravettians and Solutreans. Mainstream archaeologists regard the patterns as signs of symbolic behavior, artistic expressions woven into the material remains of daily life. The grooves are too uniform, too evenly spaced, to be mere butchery marks or incidental scratches. Under magnification, microstriations reveal that a flint burin was used at a consistent angle, shaving away ivory layer by layer to produce each line. The result is a low-relief design that plays with torchlight and shadow. Picture the artist at work. Crouched beside a shallow hearth, the torches dance, reflecting off ivory's pale sheen. With a flint blade in hand and bone against a stone anvil, the maker guides each incision with careful deliberation, pausing to examine the emerging motif. A simple line might mark the turning of a season, a set of parallel strokes could tally game sightings, and an arc might represent the curve of the river itself. But the precision, and the choice of mammoth bone, a costly and bulky medium, hints at deeper significance. At Kostenki, researchers uncovered a slab of mammoth bone engraved with a sequence of equidistant chevrons, each set separated by a blank space. Some suggest this pattern functioned as a mnemonic device, a calendar for tracking lunar cycles or animal migrations. In a landscape governed by the rhythms of ice and thaw, the ability to record time in a portable register could prove invaluable. Yet the decorative quality of the chevrons, carefully matched in depth and width, transcends mere record-keeping. These are images meant to please the eye as much as to inform the mind. Beyond such geometric patterns, more elaborate engravings emerged at Mezhirich, where archaeologists found upright mammoth bone huts laid out in circular arrays. Within the dwelling remains, engraved rib fragments bear sinuous curves resembling animal profiles, stylized horses or bison, hinting at an aesthetic impulse to capture the spirit of prey creatures. These ivory canvases blend functional architecture with artistic expression, suggesting that Paleolithic dwellings themselves were spaces of both utility and creativity. Speculative voices propose that the engraved bones served ritual ends. Imagine a communal ceremony at mealtime. Hunters gather around an enormous hearth, their prey's bones cleaned and laid bare. A revered elder traces the engraved lines with a calloused finger, recounting stories of ancestors who first crossed the plains, of mammoth hunts that bound the tribe together. The grooves become vessels of memory, channels through which history and myth flow. The very act of engraving would thus reinforce communal identity and shared origins. But mystery deepens when we consider the contexts in which some engraved fragments appear. In certain graves at Sungir, bone rods fashioned from mammoth long bones were buried alongside adults and children, their surfaces adorned with zigzag patterns. These rods, worn smooth by handling, hint at personal talismans, objects of power passed through familial lines. Were they mnemonic staffs, musical rasps, or scepters denoting status? The engraving patterns mirror those on some cave walls, suggesting a symbolic language that connected mobile objects with fixed rock art. Fringe theories take us further into uncharted territory. A handful of researchers argue that the engraved lines form proto-astronomical charts, maps of constellations as seen in Ice Age skies. They point to sequences of dots and dashes aligned in patterns that could correspond to star clusters or lunar phases. While no definitive correlation has been established, the very idea underscores the breadth of human imagination at the cold edge of the last glacial period. What we do know, however, is that the act of engraving a mammoth femur required both courage and skill. Hunters first had to fell these giants, creatures weighing several tons, using spears and coordinated group tactics. Then, the marrow must be extracted, the bone curated and transported to sheltered workshops or hearths. Finally, the artisans spent hours incising the surface with precision. This sequence reflects complex planning, the recognition that art could emerge from the remnants of subsistence, that beauty and meaning could be distilled from the massive bones of beasts whose deaths sustained human life. Recent experiments using replica tools have demonstrated the acoustic properties of engraved bone. When struck gently, some bone fragments resonate with hollow tones, an accidental flute or drum. Could the act of engraving also have tuned these bones to produce sounds used in rituals or musical performances? The interplay of visual art and sound suggests a multisensory craftsmanship that blurred the lines between utility and enchantment. Yet for all our fascination, the full story remains elusive. The engraved bones lie silent beneath museum glass, their grooves clear but their meanings obscured by time. We cannot hear the voices that once named these patterns, nor feel the tremor of ritual as flint scraped ivory. We only sense the presence of minds capable of abstraction, of turning the byproducts of survival into vessels of expression. As you stand amid the scattered bones of a Paleolithic hearth, the wind carrying the ghost of Mammoth calls, one question lingers. What other hidden messages await discovery in the engraved surfaces of ancient artifacts? What tales of art, ritual, and cosmic understanding lie waiting beneath the grooves of mammoth bone, waiting to give us chills in the silence of prehistory? The answers lie dormant, pressed into ivory, beckoning us to follow the subtle lines into the world where humankind first became artists. And as the ivory grooves of mammoth bones recede into the drifting snows of Eastern Europe, our journey turns once more to the color of life itself. Ochre, that ancient earth pigment that has stained both stone and skin since the dawn of human imagination. Picture a windswept ledge on the southern coast of South Africa, where breakers crash against fossil-laden cliffs at Pinnacle Point. Here, beneath overhangs dotted with shell middens, excavators uncovered pockets of bright red and yellow ochre, clumps of iron-rich earth smeared with wear patterns as though rubbed between fingers. Nearby hearths glow faintly in infrared scans, suggesting that people ground and heated this pigment in low-oxygen pits, perhaps to refine its hue. But for what purpose? Mainstream archaeologists propose that ochre's earliest uses centered on preservation, sealing hides for waterproofing or tanning leather for clothing. Yet its ubiquity at Middle Stone Age sites like Blombos Cave, dated to 100,000 BC, tells a broader story. There, engraved ochre fragments bear cross-hatched patterns, echoing the shells and bones around them. Shell beads and bone tools sit alongside ochre crayons, blocks smudged with fingerprints. The pigment's vibrant reds and deep oranges contrast sharply with the pale sandstone walls, hinting at an aesthetic impulse to adorn both artifact and body. Imagine the artist, perhaps a woman or child, kneeling on a sandy floor, ochre dust rising in soft clouds. With a piece of charcoal or a chewed stick, she traces lines across her forearm, dipping her palm repeatedly into a shallow dish of pigment mixed with animal fat or water. The paste pools in her skin's creases, leaving zigzags and dots that catch the flicker of torchlight. Around her, companions gather, weaving ochre-stained cords and painting the handles of their tools. In this communal ritual, color becomes identity, a shared palette marking a group's presence on a vast and changing landscape. In Europe, Neanderthals adopted ochre with similar zeal. At Maastricht, Belgium's Maastricht Belvedere Cave, red ochre was found ground into powder alongside bone tools dating to around 100,000 BC. The cave's walls show faint traces of pigment, leading some to suggest body painting and even ritualized display. Did Neanderthals smear their faces and limbs before venturing into cold forests, emblazoning themselves as hunters or shamans? The act of painting may have marked transition points, coming of age, successful hunts, or rites of passage shrouded in shadow and smoke. In the Levant, at Qafzeh Cave in what is today northern Palestine, 12 human burials dating to 100,000 BC contain large quantities of red ochre sprinkled over the skulls and chests. Children and adults lay side by side, their bones interlaced with ochre dust that must have been poured carefully during interment. Mainstream interpretations see these as some of the earliest known funerary practices, anointing the dead with pigment to honor them or to cleanse their journey to an afterlife. The sheer volume of ochre, tons carried up steep slopes, speaks to the importance of color in connecting the living and the dead. Yet questions linger in the dim corridors of prehistory. How did our ancestors come to ascribe such power to mineral pigment? Was the discovery of ochre's color an accident? Earth smeared on hands during tool-making and noticed for its vivid hue? Or did some visionary individual uncover its symbolic potential, sparking a cultural revolution that spread across continents? Evidence from both Africa and Eurasia suggests independent inventions of ochre processing. In South Africa, pits lined with clay held heated ochre. In Europe, bone flints bear ochre residues dated to 250,000 BC, possibly even before anatomically modern humans existed there. Speculative voices beckon deeper still. Some researchers propose that ochre was used in medicinal contexts, its iron oxides possessing antibacterial properties useful for treating wounds or preserving food. Did early healers mix ochre with animal fats to form salves, applying them both to skin and to stone talismans? The boundary between therapeutic and symbolic often blurs in traditional cultures. A painted wound may serve both to heal the flesh and to mark the individual as touched by ritual power. Fringe theories press even further into the realm of belief. A handful suggest that ochre pigments were ingredients in ancient mystery potions, their colors linked to trance induction during rhythmic drumming and dance. Ethnographic parallels from indigenous Australian and Amazonian societies show ochre used in body paint ceremonies to invoke ancestral spirits. Could Paleolithic peoples have danced in ochre-smeared circles, the pigment dust rising like ghosts beneath rock-roofed galleries? Though direct evidence is scant, no prehistoric dance floors have been preserved, the presence of ochre-coated footprints in some caves hints at movement performed across freshly powdered floors. Beyond its body painting role, ochre stained artifacts and dwellings. At South Africa's Subterranean Cave, walls retain ochre-based murals, smudges and stencils that may have served as territorial markers or clan symbols. Ochre pigment caked onto wooden arrow shafts suggests an aesthetic dimension to weaponry, transforming tools of survival into works of art. These objects, painted in hues of fire and blood, speak of a worldview where color bridged the gap between natural phenomena and human intention. Yet ochre's story remains incomplete. We can measure its chemical composition, iron oxide variants that yield reds, yellows, and browns, but we cannot fully reconstruct the meanings carried by each hue. Was ochre red seen as the color of Earth's lifeblood, yellow as the promise of sunlit fields? And did variations in shade mark differences in rank, gender, or group affiliation? The ethnographic record offers tantalizing hints, but no direct translations of Paleolithic pigment lexicons. As shifting climates eroded many ochre sites, much of this record lies buried or dissolved. What fragments remain have often been found by chance. Chewing gum stuck to ochre held between teeth, pigment bonded to stone tools, faint smears on cave walls. Each red smear, each flake of ochre, is a clue to a vast, multicolored tapestry of prehistoric humanity. Standing outside a shelter at sunset, one can still feel the pull of ochre's ancient glow in the fading light. A single clump of pigment, pressed between fingers, carries the residue of countless hands, ritual artists, hunters, healers, each leaving a spectral fingerprint on the canvas of time. What other ochre-colored secrets remain hidden in the layers of sediment and rock? What patterns of lines and smudges await rediscovery in forgotten rock shelters? And what will they tell us about the first moments when humans, both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, reached for Earth's colors to transform themselves, their tools, and their world? The mystery, like ochre dust, is still settling, and its true depth beckons us onward. And as the ochre smears of South Africa's rock shelters dissolve into memory, we journey northward, across arid plains and the winding Jordan Rift, to a place where water once pooled against lush shoreline, and where human mastery of fire left indelible marks on the earth. Picture the Hohle Valley during a humid interglacial epoch, roughly 790,000 BCE. Towering papyrus reeds brush the sky along the margins of a vast freshwater lake, their brittle stems crackling underfoot. Dragonflies dart above still pools. Distant hills rise in muted blues beneath drifting clouds. In a shallow depression on a silt terrace, a small flame once leapt to life, its light flickering against emerging dawn. That fire, kindled by hominin hands in a world yet unpeopled by modern humans, endures today as a cluster of hearths at Gesher Benot Ya'aqov, now immersed beneath the fertile soils of northern Palestine. Archaeologists have identified more than 20 such hearths here, each a circular patch of burned earth stained deep red, surrounded by rings of ash and charcoal. Scorch marks on nearby flint tools attest to repeated exposure to heat. Shards of nutshells, almond, pistachio, and terebinth, show burn patterns consistent with roasting. Even tiny fish vertebrae recovered from the hearth fills bear the hallmarks of cooking rather than natural charring. These layered deposits reveal that early human relatives not only harnessed fire, but did so with intent and skill, tending embers and returning again and again to this lakeside camp. Mainstream researchers regard Gesher Benot Ya'aqov as one of the earliest unequivocal records of controlled fire use outside Africa, an Apulian foothold in the Levant more than 500,000 years ago. The hearths are not isolated anomalies, but part of a structured landscape. They cluster along an ancient shoreline, spaced at regular intervals, as if marking domestic quarters or workstations. Between them lie concentrations of flint flakes and bifacial hand axes, suggesting that these fires provided focal points for tool-making, food preparation, and social interaction. Imagine the hominin family group, perhaps Homo erectus or an early Homo heidelbergensis, gathered in flickering circles as dusk deepened. A central glow illuminates the underside of reed mats laid out atop earthen floors. One figure stokes the embers, pushing a half-burned log aside to feed fresh kindling. Another skims the hot coals to roast a cache of nuts, the rich aroma mingling with the damp scent of lake mud. Children, small feet bare and darkened by silt, cluster near the flame, their faces half hidden in shadow as elders shape flint tools by the fire's edge. The repeated use of these hearths suggests a deep understanding of fire's value: warmth against chilling winds, protection from predators, and a means to extract calories and nutrients from tough plant foods and oily nuts. But fire also served as a social magnet, its light gathering individuals into patterns of shared ritual. Did early fire tenders spark conversations about seasonal migrations of deer and wild cattle? Did the crackle of burning wood punctuate the telling of inherited knowledge, how to fashion nets from papyrus fibers or navigate the lake's shoreline in birch bark rafts? Yet the hearths at Gesher Benot Ya'aqov pose deeper puzzles. What struck early firemakers to kindle flames in this particular location? The lakeshore offered water and plant resources, but archaeological layers just meters away show no evidence of hearths at other elevations. The linear arrangement hints at deliberate spatial planning. Perhaps the community envisioned a fire street, a procession of embers guiding nightly gatherings. Could these aligned hearths have marked ceremonial processions, ritual walks along the water's edge, each fire lit in sequence to commemorate phases of the moon or migrations of fish and fowl? Speculative voices venture into the realm of early ritual practice. Some scholars suggest that fire may have held a sacred dimension, a transformation element mediating between earth and sky. The repeated lighting of hearths at dawn and dusk could symbolize cosmic cycles of death and rebirth. The array of hearths, set like candles on a giant altar, might have signaled communal rites of passage, the birth of a child, the first hunt of a youth, or the mourning of a fallen elder. Though no pigment traces or carved talismans have been found here, the very act of circle building with fire speaks of purposeful, perhaps spiritual, expression. Fringe theories press further into uncharted territory. A handful of researchers propose that the Gesher hearths functioned as signal fires, markers visible across watery plains, guiding dispersed bands to seasonal gathering points. In a world devoid of written maps, the rising smoke columns could have served as beacons, linking groups across kilometers of reeds and water. The precision of hearth placement, aligned parallel to the shoreline, might have optimized visibility from small watercraft, ensuring that navigators could follow a path of flame to home territory. Yet even these tantalizing ideas remain conjectural. The hearths themselves whisper only of heat and decay, charcoal fragments, burned pebbles, the fragile residue of plant ash. We can date the charred seeds to 500,000 years ago, but we cannot hear the crackle of the logs or feel the warmth on our skin. We infer the conversations, the rituals, the migrations, yet the hearth's silent circles elude final interpretation. Modern excavations unearth the hearth fills in painstaking layers. Each dark stain is scraped and mapped, the charcoal flotation yielding tiny seeds and wood fragments. Analysis of phytoliths reveals the species of plants burned: papyrus, reeds, oak branches, painting an environmental portrait of a lakeshore forest. Yet the absence of human remains at the hearths leaves their social contexts unclear. Were these seasonal camps, occupied by multiple generations, or specialized activity areas visited briefly by small foraging parties? Researchers have simulated the fires using replica reeds and local wood species, discovering that controlled hearths could burn at temperatures above 600 degrees if properly stoked. Such mastery implies firing techniques, perhaps the use of bellows-like reed bundles to stoke embers, or the application of green wood to regulate smoke. Did these early fire practitioners pass down secret methods within family lines, marking lineages by the styles of their fires? Without a living record, we can only trace the changes in hearth size and shape over time, suggesting subtle cultural shifts in fire use. As the sun dips below the ridge, casting long shadows across the hula sediments, one senses the ancient presence lingering in the air. The lake shore may lie silent now, reclaimed by papyrus and reed, yet the stone-lined hearths rest just beneath the grass, waiting for the next dry season to reveal their embers once more. What other secrets lie hidden within these early fire circles? Secrets of social bonds forged in flame, of rituals lost beneath layers of silt, and of hominin minds that first glimpsed fire's flickering promise? The mystery smolders still, inviting us to draw closer, to listen for the soft hiss of ancient sparks, and to contemplate the fires that first gave warmth, and perhaps meaning, to a changing world. And as the embers of Gesher Benot Ya'aqov's hearths settle into memory, we turn our ears to another echo from the deep past, a melody carried not on wind, but through hollowed bone and cavernous stone. Imagine stepping into the cool silence of a Paleolithic gallery, far from daylight's glare. The air is still, damp with mineral mist, and your footsteps awaken a faint chorus of drips and distant echoes. On a low ledge, beside ochre-streaked walls, lies a narrow tube carved from the wing bone of a vulture. 4 finger holes puncture its length, each too small for modern fingers, yet perfectly aligned for Paleolithic hands. This is one of the oldest known musical instruments, a bone flute unearthed in the Swabian Jura of southern Germany, at sites like Geisenklosterle and Hohle Fels, dated to at least 40,000 BCE. Under magnification, the flute's surface reveals microscopic striations left by flint burins, evidence of deliberate shaping to produce clear, resonant tones. Nearby, a second flute from Hohle Fels, carved from the hollow bone of a mute swan, bears 5 well-spaced holes, suggesting a diatonic scale uncannily similar to our own. In the flickering torchlight of its original makers, these flutes would have sung with breathy harmonies, their notes reverberating against limestone vaults in a world still unmarked by written word. Mainstream archaeologists view these instruments as functional tools for social cohesion, invitations to communal feasts, preludes to coordinated hunts or lullabies for children huddled beside campfires. The tonal range, capable of at least 8 distinct pitches, implies melodies more complex than simple calls. Could these flutes have accompanied seasonal ceremonies marking the arrival of migrating herds, or served as mnemonic anchors, binding stories and songs together in the absence of written script? Yet, even as we trace the measured spacing of holes and reconstruct probable fingerings, deeper mysteries emerge. Why invest precious hours in crafting musical instruments when survival itself demanded ceaseless attention? The choice of rare bird bones, vulture and swan, creatures of sky and water, suggests symbolic motives. Did early musicians believe that the spirit of the bird imbued the flute with its voice, bridging earth and sky in song? And what role did acoustics play as artists actively sought resonant chambers where sound could swirl and amplify, creating an immersive auditory experience? Picture the flute maker at work, crouched on a damp ledge, the torch's smoke curling toward mottled ceilings. A piece of bone rests against a sharpening stone as a flint microblade scrapes the interior, tuning the chamber's resonance. Fingers test each hole, lips hover at the beveled mouthpiece, breath drawn in anticipation. The resulting notes rise, small and vulnerable at first, then gain confidence as walls absorb and reflect the melody, back in whispered echoes. In that moment, the cave becomes a living instrument, its rock contours shaping and coloring the tune. Beyond Germany, bone whistles and notched antler tubes appear at sites from the Dordogne to Siberia. In Spain's Prehistoric cave, bird bone flutes coalesce with ivory carvings to form a rich tapestry of sound and symbol. At the Sungir burials east of Moscow, graciously furnished graves include ivory and bone rods. Some scholars suggest these may have been rubbed or struck to produce percussive tones during funerary rites. The breadth of distribution points to a widespread human impulse to harness sound not merely for communication, but as an art form entwined with ritual and identity. Speculative voices push the narrative further. Some researchers propose that bone flutes were instruments of altered consciousness, used in trance-inducing ceremonies. Ethnographic parallels among Siberian shamans and Aboriginal Australian elders describe repetitive melodies and drone-like tones as keys to crossing thresholds of perception. Could Paleolithic musicians have leveraged the cave's acoustics and the flute's haunting timbre to facilitate visionary experiences, journeys into ancestral realms, or communion with spirit animals? Without cave paintings explicitly depicting musical scenes, such ideas remain tantalizing but unprovable. Fringe theories even claim that certain engraved hollows on cave walls served as resonators, primitive-sounding boards that amplified hidden flutes. These niches, often overlooked amid figurative animal scenes, possess calculable acoustic properties, shape and depth tuned to reinforce specific frequencies. If so, Ice Age artists may have curated performance spaces, selecting chambers not only for the graphic power of their walls, but for their oral richness, a remarkable convergence of art, science, and spirituality. Equally captivating is the question of audience. Who listened to these early concertos? In the hush of the cave, gathered faces emerge from darkness, their eyes reflecting torchlight. A small child sits enthralled as an elder plays, the notes weaving through the crowd. A hunter pauses in his tool-making, the rhythm of the flute aligning with the strike of flint on stone. The music binds the group in a shared sensory ritual, a collective heartbeat sounding against the pulse of the ancient earth. Experimental reconstructions have brought these flutes back to life. Modern musicians don replicas and coax melodies from the bore with breath and practice. The results are startling. Pure, ethereal tones that resonate with an uncanny clarity. In museum labs, microphones capture the sound waves, and spectrograms reveal acoustic profiles that mirror those of contemporary woodwind instruments. Yet, for all this technical analysis, the emotional resonance remains elusive, an echo of a human experience lost to time. As you stand in the entrance of a Paleolithic cave replica, its rough walls looming in twilight, you can almost hear the breathy soprano of a bone flute carrying across 10 millennia. The music dissolves into silence, but its heartbeat lingers in the air. What other instruments await discovery, buried beneath sediments and waiting for patient excavation? And what will they reveal about the first melodies, those primordial songs that gave voice to human wonder, fear, and longing in the silent depths of prehistory? The cave holds its secrets in shadow and stone, inviting us to listen again and again for the faintest strains of an ancient symphony. And as the plaintive notes of ancient bone flutes dissolve into the hush of prehistory, our path turns westward, across continents and epochs, to the ice-sculpted plains of Pleistocene North America. Here, beneath shifting sagebrush and windswept dunes, lie the remnants of a hunt so audacious it still borders on the unbelievable. The pursuit of giant ground sloths using pits, snares, and sheer human will. Imagine standing on a frost-hardened plateau in the American Southwest, your boots cracking the thin ice that forms each morning on shallow puddles. Behind you, the rising sun paints a pale wash of gold across a landscape dotted with tumbled sandstone and clumps of desert grass. At your feet, the soil reveals dark, circular depressions, crater-like pits rimmed with weathered stones, some more than 2 meters across and a meter deep. These are not natural sinkholes, but the outlines of prehistoric traps designed to ensnare creatures far larger than any human. Mainstream archaeologists have identified such features in sites from Arizona to Texas, dating them to between 13,000 and 11,000 BCE. The pits were often dug into slopes, lined with logs or brush, and camouflaged with branches. Slip into the mouth of one, and a giant ground sloth, mammoth in size, weighing over a ton, might teeter on the hidden edge before toppling into the pit below. There, spears and atlatl darts, crafted from sharpened bones or flint points, awaited its flailing bulk. Bonnie Pit, a site in New Mexico, yielded sloth bones with embedded projectile points, silent testimony to close quarters conflict. Picture a hunting party stalking at dawn. Hunters fan out across the plain, beating the air with rattling sticks and shouting in low, urgent tones. Their aim is to herd the sloth toward a subtle funnel of stakes, an array of wooden posts invisible behind sagebrush. As the massive animal lumbers forward, narrow corridors of escape collapse behind it, guiding its lumbering form toward the pit. Then, a final nudge sends it over the brink. The earth trembles with the thudding fall. Dust clouds rise as hunters leap into action, voices echoing against stone outcrops. Yet, building such traps demanded extraordinary planning and labor. Each pit required hours, if not days, of digging with stone tools, followed by the felling and placement of sturdy logs. The stakes had to be sourced from distant groves, trimmed, sharpened, and firmly planted. Did families settle seasonally in these hunting grounds, maintaining traps for generations? Or did specialized bands migrate with the sloths, returning each year to repair and reuse their built-in snares? The very existence of these structures suggests coordinated social organization, far beyond simple foraging bands. Beyond the pits themselves, cut marks on sloth bones hint at systematic processing. Knife marks along vertebrae and ribs match patterns seen at Clovis sites, indicating that flesh was removed en masse, perhaps to preserve meat and hide for storage. In some cases, bones were left arranged in neat piles, as though selected elements were reserved for tool-making or ritual disposal. Could the carnage of the hunt have been followed by ceremonies, feasting, tool exchanges or rites to honor the fallen beast's spirit? The absence of clear mortuary deposits leaves this question tantalizingly open. Speculative voices suggest still bolder possibilities. A few researchers propose that Ice Age hunters used fire and smoke to drive sloths into traps, burning hide from pits, to create suffocating plumes that forced animals to flee in panic. Ethnographic parallels among later indigenous groups describe smoke drives used on smaller game. Could a scaled-up version have corralled sloths into prepared pits? Archaeological evidence of burned reeds and charcoal near some pits supports the idea that fire played a role, but whether for hunting or ritual remains unclear. Fringe theories venture yet further. Some argue that sloth traps served not only for sustenance, but as socio-political statements, monumental displays of collective prowess signaling territorial claims or forging alliances through feasting festivals. They point to the sheer size of the pits, structures comparable to those built by pastoralist societies millennia later, suggesting that Ice Age communities might have staged grand gatherings centered on the communal slaughter of a giant sloth. The subsequent distribution of meat and hides could have reinforced social bonds in ways that echo the potlatch ceremonies of much later cultures. Yet, for all its daring ingenuity, the practice of sloth trapping endured only a brief moment in prehistory. As climate warmed and sloth populations dwindled, the pits fell into disuse, their wooden lining rotted, and soil gradually swallowed their rims. Today, only the shallow ghosts of these depressions remain, visible in satellite imagery and on-the-ground surveys. Many lie undiscovered beneath brush. Others have been eroded by wind and rain, their outlines faint as memory. In the laboratories of archaeology departments, researchers analyze soil samples from pit fills, identifying pollen grains and phytoliths that reveal seasonal patterns, whether pits were active in spring greenup or autumn migrations. Radiocarbon dating of charred wood and charcoal pinpoints the first and last uses of traps, charting a timeline of human adaptation and sloth decline. But the most haunting evidence remains the embedded spear, an intimate snapshot of a hunter's aim and a sloth's desperate final moments. Standing amid the ghostly circles, one can almost hear the thunder of sloth hooves and the distant calls of hunters echoing across the plain. The wind stirs the grasses, and for a fleeting moment the earth seems alive with ancient footsteps and the crackle of torches. Yet the rock-sunk pits remain silent, their true stories buried beneath layers of silt and speculation. What other signs of Paleolithic ingenuity lie hidden in forgotten landscapes, traps for horses, mammoths, or bison waiting to be unearthed? And what will they tell us about the social structures, rituals, and daring strategies of the earliest American hunters? The mystery endures, inviting us to peer into the depths of time and listen for the muted drumbeat of Ice Age hunts, echoes that promise chills and inspiration for those who seek them. And as the echo of pitfall drums fades from the sagebrush plains of Ice Age America, we return once more to the cradled depths of prehistoric dwellings, this time to a limestone shelter where early Homo sapiens laid their dead to rest with solemn care. Welcome to Qafzeh Cave, perched on a rocky ledge overlooking Wadi el-Mughara in today's northern Palestine, where the remains of at least 20 individuals reveal a chapter of funerary ritual more than 100,000 years old. Imagine stepping into the twilight hush of Qafzeh Cave. The floor slopes gently inward, its ochre-stained sediments layered like pages of a lost book. Faint traces of hearth charcoal mingle with lithic debris, while ochre smears on stone walls catch stray torchlight in dull crimson gleams. In one of the deepest recesses, a group of burials emerges from the earth, skeletons arranged not haphazardly but positioned with unmistakable intention. Among them lies Qafzeh 11, a young adolescent laid supine, knees drawn upward as if in quiet repose. But the body alone does not tell the full story. Under and around Qafzeh 11's skull rest dozens of red deer antler fragments, some positioned beneath the chin, others beside the feet. A handful of freshwater snail shells lie nearby, their pale curves inscribed by centuries of sediment pressure. And draped lightly over the bones, minute particles of red ochre, iron oxide ground to powder, stain the surrounding soil as though the flesh itself had been daubed in life's blood. Mainstream researchers view this burial as one of the earliest clear examples of symbolic funerary practice. The deliberate placement of organic objects, antlers prized for their regenerative symbolism, shells carried from distant springs, and the sprinkling of ochre suggest a belief in an afterlife or, at the very least, a profound respect for the dead. In a world governed by survival's stark necessities, the community paused to honor one among them, investing time and resources into a ritual that transcended the immediate needs of shelter and feast. Picture the ceremony: multiple hands arranging antler fragments like petals of a crimson flower, a chosen member grinding ochre against stone, fingers red as dawn, a hushed circle of mourners pausing to recall the child's laughter and footsteps echoing across the cave floor. Each gesture, each placement, required intention. The antlers had to be collected from forested slopes below, cleaned of bark, and carried up winding trails. The ochre, too, came from nearby beds of iron-rich clay, harvested and ground into fine dust. All these actions speak to a community attuned not only to the land's resources, but to the invisible bonds that tie the living to the dead. Yet questions linger in the cave's stillness. Why choose deer antler rather than the more common ochre-stained stones or shells found elsewhere in the site? Did antler fragments carry a specific metaphor of regeneration, strength, or ancestral connection? Why include shells from flowing springs rather than the ubiquitous marine varieties traded along coastal routes? Each choice hints at layers of meaning we can merely glimpse, not fully grasp. Speculative voices invite us to imagine a richer tapestry of belief. Perhaps the antlers represented a totemic ancestor, an animal spirit guiding the adolescent into a world beyond bones and blood. The shells, with their spiraling forms, might have symbolized the cycle of life, their chambers mirroring hidden chambers of the earth and spirit. Did mourners press ochre into the child's hair or hands before interment, leaving pigment traces that have vanished with time? The interplay of color, bone, and shell suggests a multi-sensory rite, one that engaged sight, touch, and perhaps even the scent of crushed flowers or resins now lost to memory. Fringe theories, too, push the boundaries of interpretation. Some propose that Qafzeh's burials mark the beginnings of ancestor worship, that the dead were believed to watch over settlements from the shadows of cave walls. Others suggest that the arrangement of antlers and shells corresponds to star patterns, mapping celestial knowledge into the earthbound realm of the grave. While chromatographic analyses reveal the composition of ochre, no pigment hue remains that might directly confirm such cosmic intent. Yet the human impulse to connect heaven and earth, life and death, weaves through these speculations like a fragile thread. Comparative evidence at School Cave, just a few kilometers away, offers parallel burials, more ochre-stained bodies arranged with ochre closets and marine shells. Together with Qafzeh, these sites sketch a portrait of early Homo sapiens in the Levant practicing ritual burial on a scale unseen anywhere else at the time. Did these communities share a common funerary tradition carried from Africa? Or did similar innovations emerge independently in response to the universal challenge of death? Beyond symbolism, funerary practices had social and practical dimensions. Burial deep within the cave protected bodies from scavengers, limiting the spread of disease and discouraging predators. Placing the dead away from living quarters may have served hygienic needs as much as spiritual ones. Yet pragmatic and symbolic motives often intertwine. Safeguarding the remains of loved ones also honors them, turning practical burial pits into hallowed ground. Modern excavators tread carefully through Qafzeh's layered sediments, mapping each bone fragment, each fleck of ochre, each shell shard. Micro-CT scans of antler fragments reveal cut marks that suggest the tip of a stone blade used to shape and select pieces for the burial. Residue analyses detect organic traces, perhaps the oils of animal fat used to bind ochre to bone. But none of these data can tell us the words spoken in that dim chamber, the tears that fell on dirt-stained cheeks, or the songs that may have accompanied the interment. Standing at Qafzeh's mouth, as the sun's last rays gild the valley below, one senses the profound quiet of remembrance that first settled here more than 100,000 years ago. The child's bones, the antler fragments, the powdered crimson, together they weave a narrative of loss and care, of creativity and compassion that resonates across millennia. What other secrets lie hidden in Qafzeh's silent niches, and in caves around the world where our ancestors paused to touch the face of death with ritual? The candle of inquiry continues to burn, illuminating the shadows of prehistory. The true depth of meaning behind these early burials remains unspoken, inviting us to listen more closely to the quiet voices etched in bone and pigment. And as the ochre-drizzled graves of Cosquer Cave yield their silent testament to early Homo sapiens' reverence for the dead, our journey moves southward, deep into the heart of Africa, where another testament to human ingenuity lies buried in river silt and whispers of ancient waters. Imagine standing on a riverbank in the Katanga region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the Njili River threads through lush papyrus stands and dense gallery forests. The air is heavy with humidity and the hum of cicadas. Beneath your feet, dark, fine-grained sediments, once the bed of a vast Pleistocene lake, cradle fragments of bone, stone flakes, and the ghostly curve of wooden digging sticks. Here, in the 1980s, archaeologists uncovered some of the oldest barbed bone tools known to science. Harpoon points carved from the long bones of catfish, their barbs meticulously shaped to catch and hold slippery prey. These bone barbs date to approximately 90,000 BC, far earlier than similar technologies elsewhere. Each barb bears telltale microstriations, incisions only a master craftsman could control, scoring the bone surface with flint tools to fashion hooks and barbs. The central shaft of each harpoon was split along its length, creating two prongs into which the barbs were wedged, then bound together with plant fibers and sealed with resin. The resulting implements could impale fish up to a meter in length, a lifeline to communities adapting to rich riverine ecosystems in a changing climate. But these barbed points are more than just fishing gear. They are windows into the minds of their makers. Picture a Katanga artisan crouched in a shaded grove, grinding the end of a catfish bone against a sandstone slab to smooth grain and remove marrow. With each careful scrape of a flint flake, barbs emerge, small curved hooks arranged at precise intervals. These hooks had to engage flesh firmly without bending or breaking. The artisan likely tested each barb's angle against a piece of hide or skin, judging its depth of penetration, reshaping it until it met a tacit standard passed down through generations. Mainstream researchers interpret these bone barbs as evidence of advanced fishing strategies and social cooperation. Large fish schools migrating upstream could sustain substantial groups through seasonal fluctuations. Harpoon hunting demands coordination. One or more hunters wade into shallow water, baiting pools with crushed tubers or fish carcasses, while others hold canoe-like rafts of papyrus reed ready to retrieve impaled catch. The spectacle of a giant catfish thrashing at the end of a bone-tipped shaft would have been a communal event, one that reinforced cooperation, coordination, and shared success. Yet these barbed points also suggest a cognitive leap. an understanding of cause and effect over time. The artisan had to anticipate how the barb would travel through water, how the attack wound would prevent the fish's escape, and how the tool's composite parts, bone, fiber, resin, would behave when wet and stressed. This sequence of planning, manufacture, and use prefigures the complex tool chains of much later societies. In this light, the katana barbs stand as precursors to the composite weapons that dominated human hunting strategies across millennia. Beyond their practical function, these implements may have carried deeper symbolic weight. In many traditional cultures, fish occupy liminal roles, creatures of water, symbols of transformation, sources of life and death. Could the act of fashioning a fishing harpoon have been imbued with ritual significance? The patterns etched along the shaft, deliberate incisions that go beyond functional necessity, might have formed clan marks or ownership symbols, or encoded information about the season, the maker's identity, or the intended use. Speculative voices propose that barbed points were also used in initiatory ceremonies. Young hunters, at the onset of adulthood, may have been taught harpoon crafting as a rite of passage, learning to take life responsibly and to navigate the river's perils. The ceremonial presentation of a finely carved bone barb to each initiate, perhaps painted with ochre or smeared with fish oil, could have marked their transition from child to skilled provider. Though no direct evidence of such rites has survived, the care lavished on these tools suggests they were more than disposable hunting implements. Fringe theories whisper of Neolithic shamanic fishing rituals. In remote villages across Africa, even today, fish bones are sometimes used in divination or healing ceremonies. Their shapes read as omens or messages from ancestral spirits of the water. Could the katana barbs have doubled as ritual objects, each barb representing a spirit guide, each harpoon tip a conduit between the human and aquatic realms? While no pigment traces or ritual deposits have been documented alongside these tools, the possibility underscores the multifaceted roles objects can play in human cultures. Contextual clues at katana enrich the mystery. Alongside barbed points, archaeologists found clusters of heated rock, suggesting ovens used to cook fish near the water's edge. Layers of crushed shell middens reveal not just catfish, but snails and freshwater bivalves, an entire aquatic pantry exploited with skill.